starting with, Liam, the official hiring of Vince Russo.
Yay!
You can tell too. Like obviously he had his fingerprints on the early episodes because he was like chipping in ideas and he was Jarrett's phone buddy. But like he's on board starting as of I think it's July 10th, and you can tell. You can certainly tell.
I was gonna say that makes sense because the first July pay-per-view was kind of absent of bullshit.
And even the second one, which by all accounts he had very little input on, number 4, and it's from 5 on that he starts having input. And 4 is probably the best of the bunch. It's the one we did the watch along. It's actually a very fun show, top to bottom. And then the bullshit starts coming in, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's really funny because you can kind of tell, right? It's like 4, and even I think 5 was like a little bit of it, and then it just kind of shot downhill real quickly.
Because the other point we'll talk about, they went broke, but we'll talk about that as well in a second. But Vince Russo he returned to the WWF in late June, and it was very controversial. No one wanted him there, so he returned to WWF. There was rumors that he'd be like taking over Raw and SmackDown, and he'd be head of creative, and that didn't happen. And he was very, very, very quickly downgraded to just a consultant, where he would just chip in ideas and he would consult and he would read the scripts and he would watch the shows and then like critique them and offer notes while sitting at home. So he wasn't much a fan of that. So like
what everyone else does for free on Twitter.
Legitimately, it seems like a very good gig because Jerry Jarrett wrote in his book, Jeff called and advised that Vince Russo had declined his deal with WWE and come to work for us. WWE was offering him $125,000 per year to stay at home in Atlanta and watch the shows and serve as an advisor. Our offer is $100,000 and come to work full-time in Hendersonville.
That's still so much money for fucking Vince Russo.
I know, especially when you consider this company is broke, which again we'll get into in a second. But this company is out of money, and they're like $100,000 for Vince Russo. That makes sense, right?
I mean, yeah.
But it's very funny that he returned to WWF and was immediately gone. It was like he was there for a week. He went to the offices like twice. Then he went home and he went back to TNA.
It's kind of like, you know, the blueprint for the TNA-WWE relationship moving forward, huh?
And it's quite interesting that there was a note on the website that Jerry Jarrett basically had to justify this hire because no one wanted Vince Russo there. Jerry Jarrett mentioned in his book that, like, reaction to Vince Russo being hired was 95% negative. So, like, there's a whole paragraph on the website. It's like, look, Vince Russo, he did well in the WWF, and he did badly in WCW. But I talked to JJ Dillon, and I know why WCW went badly, so I understand it, and he deserves a shot. He's had 1 win and 1 loss, but the loss wasn't his fault. And I don't think Jerry actually believed this, if you read his book. I don't think he ever liked Vince Russo. I think he was hiring Jeff's friend, but fair play to him for getting out there and trying to make people not hate it.
Are Jeff and Vince still cool with each other?
Yeah. McMahon or Russo?
Russo.
Yeah, Russo. Yeah, McMahon, not so much.
Well, they're obviously cool enough to the fact that they employ him.
Well, yeah, they're cool now, but it took a good, 15 years.
How can you be friends with Vince Russo? Especially, if you've employed him in any way.
Well, because when they worked together in WCW, Vince pushed him. So that does foster friendship.
Yeah, sure. But then he had, 10 years of bad. So maybe that outweighs it, huh?
Well, this wasn't in the 10 years of bad yet, though. This was only a year after WCW.
That's what I'm saying now, 2021. Jeff Jarrett, Vince Russo.
Oh, do you think they're still pals now? I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess they're probably still friends. There's nothing that would make them not friendly.
Besides the decade of terrible booking.
Yeah, but, I don't think Jeff is our friendship is over because he writes shitty angles.
I don't know. I would end my friendships if they wrote shitty angles.
It's like, how dare you be bad at creative in wrestling? There's other reasons to hate Vince Russo if you listen to all his podcast content, which, God forbid, why would you? But
says we, podcast all-stars and kings.
Yes, we are the arbitrators of good and bad podcasts. But Jeff Jarrett's like, you booked Jenna Maraska against Charmel. Friendship ended.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been the last straw for me, sure.
That's the point at which you will never talk to anybody again.
Mm-hmm. Because everyone would have booked that match.
We have Vinny Roo in the fold officially full-time. Another part of the reason Jerry Jarrett was okay with hiring him is, by all accounts, Jerry Jarrett was working very long days writing these shows. And he's like, I can't produce all these pre-tapes. I can't write all these shows. I do need extra help. And there's not a ton of qualified extra help in wrestling because, as illustrated in the history of wrestling, it's the same 10 people get these jobs over and over and over again. So People tend to fall back on the people they know, and they fell back on Vince Russo, who was also kind of already working for the company the whole time anyway.
They should have hired 5-year-old Liam Jones.
Oh yeah, and he can. What would you have booked for TNA? You probably would have still been high on Malice.
Yeah, well, as a kid, obviously, yeah. 5-year-old Liam, really into colors, so probably
Rainbow Express.
The Rainbow Express on top, yeah. And Jeff Jarrett with his very colorful pants.
Oh yeah, it was his blue combos, and I can't remember any other colors he wore in these shows other than the blue one, but I'm sure he wore other ones.
I think he wore black, so that kind of falls out part. But I imagine very quickly he would have learnt what appeals to the Book of Man. So,
Were you watching wrestling when you were 5?
See, as I've mentioned before on other less successful podcasts of ours, I don't remember like my specific beginnings in wrestling. I kind of just always knew about it. But if I had to think of like some of the earliest things I ever saw, probably would have been a couple years after this at this point. Like I have very vivid memories of early Victoria Stevie Richards stuff.
Oh, of course. Which would have been 03?
Yeah, so maybe just before I had started paying any attention. I could probably work it out via seeing when things started airing here and when. But yeah, I don't really know. I remember like, as a kid I went to a wrestling show very, very young. So actually no, I probably knew what wrestling was, but maybe not what WWE was.
Because I don't think I started watching wrestling until I was like 7-ish. Because the show I remember most vividly is SummerSlam 2000 as my earliest show, but I would have watched stuff before that. Because I remember Steve Blackman against Shane McMahon and Shane McMahon falling off stages, and I remember TLC. Or was it TLC? Yeah, it would have been TLC at that stage. So that's like the earliest I remember actively engaging with wrestling, but I'm sure I watched bits and bobs before that.
You know, it's going to be really funny.
What?
20 years from now when these kids have podcasts and they're like, I remember the first thing I saw in wrestling was The Fiend and the Fiendess.
No!
And I was hooked from the beginning.
No! It's like the Alicia against Melina Fox tough enough contestant, but it's going to be everybody.
Yeah, but like, you know, everyone gets into it at a certain point, I suppose. It's going to be really interesting seeing the kids who see stuff like AEW for their first experience.
Good wrestling, yes.
Yeah, it's going to be like, that's going to be like, we all think of the immediate reactions to having a major wrestling company again, right? That isn't shit. Mm-hmm. But we don't think about the long-term repercussions of this, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see what those fans end up turning into down the track. Because maybe like not my generation, well, not my generation because I was born in 97. So I guess like kids who were like 10 in 97, right? They would have seen more WCW than WWF here. Mm-hmm. WCW was bigger here.
So they would have been big fans of Goldberg, but not Steve Austin.
Probably because WCW toured here more. And if you ever talk to the older generation about wrestling, especially in Australia, that they will more often than not bring up WCW as like their point of reference than they will WWF.
That makes sense. Why they all do spears? Do they all do spears, Liam? Does everyone do a spear?
I think everyone who's into wrestling does a spear because it's the easiest thing to do and it's dope.
To be fair, if you're thinking about influence, is WCW more influential than WWF in general?
There's probably a case for it.
When you think of the wrestlers people always cite as inspirations, it's always people like Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, and you very rarely hear people being like, oh, 98 Triple H is the guy I'm really trying to emulate here. You
could also probably say like structurally too, like just from a show's like point of view, the idea of, the cool heel like probably came from WCW, right?
Mm-hmm. That was kind of what the NWO were.
NWO peaked the highest, and like what was around first, like heel Vince McMahon or heel WCW authority figure? Not Vince, Eric.
It would have been Eric before Vince. Yeah, Eric would have joined the NWO before Vince was like a full-on heel on television. So
you could kind of quote, like, heel authority figure comes from WCW as well.
Which all bad things do trace back to Eric Bischoff, so that makes sense.
Yeah, so, there's probably a case for it, that, like, wrestling today is more heavily based off WCW than it is WWE. And that could also be said, just with the AEW influence as well.
Oh, can it be said about the TNA influence, though?
I don't know if it's, like, as big of a thing, but, like, TNA definitely does have an influence.
And, well, when you specifically look at the X division, like, the Styles Daniels Joe generation probably were more influential than anything that happened in WWF at the time.
Yeah.
Like, to cite a specific example, Will Ospreay. Like, his inspiration is that era AJ Styles. So, what does WWE have?
And you're seeing more and more like tag teams come up and cite Motor City Machine Guns.
The women, a lot of them cite like the Knockouts as, you know, this is why I saw myself actually doing this as wrestling instead of as, we'll talk about on these shows, sex objects.
Well, it's like, you got to think about it. Like, if they weren't watching, like, you know, Japanese women's wrestling, the jump in quality was basically like Lita, Trish, Knockouts. Because like that middle section wasn't really, you know, flourishing.
You have to get the Gail Kim and Awesome Kong.
It's an interesting dynamic to think about. It's funny that we're like at that stage now. You know what I mean? Like, we used to hear everyone have these discussions about, you know, earlier stuff, and then now it's starting to catch up where you're like, the Motor City Machine Guns probably way more influential than people give them credit for.
They sure are. Even if you take out the wrestling, just in terms of how they look. Like, everyone started dressing like the Guns for like a decade. Everyone
bites off AJ and everyone bites off the Guns. Like, look-wise.
People bring back the AJ Styles like 02 to 05 look.
The problem is, like, everyone jumped on the long tights AJ stuff.
I know. Everyone wears AJ tights these days. I don't like the AJ tights that much. Well, especially his modern tights. I like his like 09 tights. Those are cool.
I liked his tights for the most part up until like mid WWE stuff. Like, his later WWE stuff is like pretty bad. But like SmackDown Revival era AJ, sure.
So Vince Russo's back, as we were talking about. All that comes with Vince Russo is also back, as we'll also talk about when we start talking about these shows. All right, so the big story in 2002, as we were mentioning before we got derailed by Twitter, the Pandas deal was still humming along, and the big thing was some big internal conflict in TNA, because while the Panda deal was moving along, Vince Russo decided to try and get himself in the ear of the Carter family to try and oust Jerry Jarrett and put himself in charge.
I read that first line that's on the notes, where it said that Jerry had sensed bad vibes, and I knew immediately that it was Vince Russo.
Yeah, so the quote from October 2002 in Jerry's book is, "I can't explain my feelings, but I sense bad vibes from Dixie tonight. Jeff fears that some of our staff are trying to improve their standing during this transition and maybe poisoning Dixie in an effort to enhance their standing. This always takes place during transitions in a company. I just hope Dixie does not fall victim if this is the case." And like, yeah, same thing. It's like, read that quote, it's like, oh, Russo, you conniving scum.
It's always Russo.
This business is like on the verge of going bust if this deal doesn't go through. People will lose their jobs, everything will fall apart if this deal doesn't go through, and Vince Russo smells blood. He senses an opportunity. He's just like, this moment of transition is a moment of weakness, and I must strike with the Carter family to bury Jerry and push my agenda so I can do my KKK angles and I can do my making light of rape angles that we mentioned last week, so he can get all that in.
Get the women beating.
Oh yeah, and all the misogyny and women beating and all the stuff that comes
Sexism,
with Vince Russo's booking.
homophobia.
He wants to get it all in at perhaps the expense of the... And like, imagine if you're Panda. Imagine if you're like these business executives who work in the energy industry and don't understand pro wrestling. While you're doing this big deal to acquire a pro wrestling company, all you're getting is like backstabbing and conniving and politicking from these goobers.
I like the idea that Vince Russo he just smelt blood in the water, and he's like, you know, we're going through a real tough time right now, but I can improve my standing here. Dun, dun.
It is typical, and it's like, it worked. That's the worst part. It did seem to work that he got the ear of Dixie and he got the ear of Chris Sobol, who they were putting in charge of TNA on the Panda end. And he did seem to poison the well. He did seem to be like, oh, you know, if you look at how the company's been run so far, Jerry hasn't been doing a good job, has he? Oh, his creative ideas. Oh, that sucks. So I can only imagine during the show, it's like Dixie, it's like, oh, that angle sucked, didn't it, Dixie? Oh, that match didn't get over. What's happening here, Dixie?
You're just texting Dixie the whole time, saying, oh, I didn't do this one. I did this one, though. Oh, that was Jerry's idea?
Famously, I remember like reporting in like 07, 08, 09 when people didn't understand TNA stories that it would always be explained, Vince would explain them in depth to Dixie, and that's the reason she would never get mad at him for writing stories that nobody could possibly comprehend, because he explained them to her, and I guess then they make sense. So like this is a thing. He's been laying the seeds for his relationship with Dixie right here all the way back in 2002 to do the same thing over and over again for another freaking 10 years.
Problem, like, he's not even like, I don't know. I don't even find him to be like a charismatic dude though. Like, but he has like all the hallmarks of one.
Yeah, he's like that sleazebag charisma guy who's like even like, he still has disciples to this day, so you can't say he doesn't have any charisma.
Like I can.
Well, you can.
I can 100% say that, and did. I get Cornette, right? Like, Cornette clearly has like the gift of the gab, you know what I mean? But it's like, reason I just don't understand.
He seems to get in people's ear, and they seem to stick with him long past the point which they ever should.
He must be like good at intersplicing business stuff as well. That's the only way I can think of it, is like he has like a decent business knowledge as well as like just a confidence in his writing.
I think he's just good at sabotaging other people.
Just a professional backstabber.
Yeah, I don't even think he's probably good at like hyping himself up as he is good at tearing other people down.
That's what you want though, isn't it?
Yeah, so like he's good here at not being like, my creative vision is the only creative vision. He's good here at being like, oh, this Jerry guy, doesn't he suck?
Now let me tell you about this wonderful Brian Lawler story I have planned.
Because like Dave Meltzer makes a very good point at one stage in the Wrestling Observer this month, where he talks about how if you're Panda and you're simply looking at Vince Russo's like press clippings and Vince Russo's whatever the equivalent of Wikipedia pages at the time, you see a guy who wrote for the WWF during its biggest period, you see a guy who wrote for WCW, you see a guy who's like, oh, this guy was a creative force in the two biggest wrestling companies that existed in the last 20 years. So if you're Panda who knows nothing, you're like, well, you know, this Vince Russo guy might know what he's talking about. And if you're a wrestling fan, you're like, no, he doesn't.
Just get one guy in there going, no.
It goes most of the month where Jerry is like, it seems like the Panda people are souring on me, and I can't quite tell why.
Poor Jerry.
It goes all the way to an October 24th meeting where the shit kind of hits the fan, where everybody just starts burying the shows on a conference call that has Chris Sabal and Dixie Carter on it, and Jerry is not best pleased that he basically finds out that everyone in the room hates him. Everybody has been working behind the scenes to kind of sabotage him and align with Vince Russo. And the worst part of it is, it seems like Jeff has been too.
Yeah, what the fuck, Jeff?
Because there's notes in the press that Jeff is trying to like stay above it and stay out of it in a way that's kind of like, actually, I'm secretly backing Russo here.
What a dick.
Being like, I don't want to intervene in this backstabbing, so I will simply let it continue to happen.
I will be complacent in the backstabbing of my father.
Poor guy. So yeah, it reached a stage where he's borderline issued an ultimatum where he wanted out of the company, didn't want to write the shows anymore, and he figured people would be loyal to him. People like Six Pac, people like Scott Hall, Kurt Hennig, and Mike Tenay probably wouldn't stay if he was forced out. And he wasn't by the end of October yet anyway, so they had not come to that yet. But the entire month is literally a power struggle that did spill over into the public. Like once that October 24th meeting went down, where like the Vince Russo's intentions kind of became clear, that immediately became public and spilled out.
But they told everyone so nicely not to leak things.
Yeah, but then Jerry got backstabbed and started leaking things himself.
Yeah.
You know what my absolute favorite thing actually is? Because the way I research this podcast is I go through all the shows, outline what happened, then go through PW Torch for the era, go through Wrestling Observer for the era, and then go through Jerry's book for the era. And my absolute favorite thing is, like, because I read Torch first and then read Jerry's book last, so often is there like direct quotes from Jerry's book that were just in the Torch.
I wonder who could possibly be leaking things.
I wonder who told Wade Keller that. Could possibly be Jerry.
I respect Jerry a lot coming out of this. I just like his whole, well, first of all, his complete and utter dismissal and distaste for Vince Russo, which is always going to appeal to me, and be like his idea of like, let's just do wrestling. And
he might have some bad ideas, but his ideas are rooted in doing wrestling. Oh dear. So yeah, that power struggle played out most of the month as Vince Russo tried to ingratiate himself with the Carters, and as Jerry Jarrett desperately tried to cling onto the company in which he poured a ton of money into, and is trying to keep open.
No good deed goes unpunished.
It doesn't, especially when your son sides with the goober who has terrible creative ideas.
Damn it, Jeff! What the fuck?
Yeah, really? Like really? Like, Jeff is like, I want to start a wrestling company, Dad. And his dad is like, all right, I'll put
help.
my money in. Yeah, and then Jeff goes and does this to him.
Can't trust your kids, obviously.
No, you really can't. And that's what happens when you become business partners with people you, like, are family members with. Because, realistically, those relationships are not relationships you choose, but relationships that are foisted upon us by the freaking DNA. So,
The DNA of TNA.
hey, that's not for another 4 years.
I wonder if this led to like any sort of a strenuous relationship between the Jerretts at the time.
Oh, it did. They famously fell out after like the foundation. Yeah, they didn't talk for years and years and years after all this eventually like washed itself out.
I wish they still didn't. I wish they just never got over it.
I'm pretty sure they did reconnect, and they are at the very least on talking terms. But yeah, coming out of all of this, like Jerry pretty understandably felt pretty betrayed by his son.
I would too. Not for like backstabbing me and kicking me out of the company, but for siding with Vince Russo on anything ever.
Yeah, it would be one thing if you sided with somebody who was at least good, but like you chose Vince Russo over me.
Ugh, it's worse than death.
So yeah, the big story of the month as we go into broad topics for the half of you that want broad topics was Jeff Jarrett winning the NWA title from Ron Killings. He defeated him on NWA TNA pay-per-view number 22, in which Vince Russo was revealed to be Mr. Wrestling number 3.
By God.
Yeah, there was a whole story through the first 2 shows where like they were trying to reveal the identity, so Ron Killings offered Mr. Wrestling 3 a title match. Mr. Wrestling 3 did not accept that title match because they thought it was Jarrett, and then Jarrett was like, I'm not Mr. Wrestling 3, I'm not accepting this title match because I'm not Mr. Wrestling 3. Then he earned his title match by winning a tournament that kind of fell apart because Sean Waltman stopped participating in it due to injury. But again, Jarrett beat BG, and Jarrett beat Hennig in order to win his number 1 contendership and beat Killings to become world champion with the first guitar shot in TNA history, Liam.
It's an historic moment, and not from the person you think to do it.
Yeah, there are 2 guitar shots in the month of November. The first one is by Mr. Wrestling 3 to Ron Killings. And then the second one is by Jeff Jarrett to a ring post.
That's truly like all that we were talking about at the start, like the big build up to when Jarrett will finally use the guitar, and it's like, oh, he won't.
Yeah, his big guitar shot in the month of November is destroying it on the ring post because he does not want to use the guitar.
Because he's a big baby face.
It's weird. He's not. Because in Jerry's book, he literally outlines it's like all the programs he's going to work as a heel, and then he's like, oh, we can turn you face after that, and then you can be, we could run all those programs back. And then you're like, wait, he's meant to be a baby face on this show, or a heel on this show?
I don't know, maybe, it's so confusing. I don't know who's a face or who's a heel, or, like, Russo's being a fucking cunt in the ring, and then people are cheering him, and then some boo him, and then it's nothing, it's so insane, and it's hard to follow, and nothing matters.
Like, I guess you could argue Jarrett against Killings is heel versus heel, even though Ron is likable, Jarrett's not very likable, but the crowd are kind of behind Jarrett, because Jarrett cut his big baby face promo.
Yeah, Jarrett set himself up as the face for the match. And then he also didn't take the help from Mr. Wrestling 3.
Yeah, so he's, at the very least, not aligned with Russo, even if he's still a heel? I don't know. It's impossible to work out. You cannot work out.
Is Russo still a Klansman here?
Maybe, probably. Again, no way of knowing.
Yeah. This was a whole to-do, but it felt very TNA, didn't it? This is the most TNA we've witnessed yet.
Yeah, this is a very TNA month. Actually, I think the Russo promo the next week is the most TNA. TNA has TNA'd up until this point, but...
I meant the whole Russo stuff over this month and the Jarrett stuff over this month.
Yeah, it does feel like... Because, as you mentioned, when we were starting the show, when you were talking about how, like, oh, last month was your favorite month. Last month was just kind of like a normal pro wrestling month. It's just like, we'll do matches, we'll do our stories. It's a pretty normal month. There's problems with it because it's TNA, and there's never not going to be problems with it. But it did feel like there's like, let's do some straightforward pro wrestling. And now it's like, the month started with some relatively straightforward pro wrestling.
You watch it unravel throughout the month.
You do. You watch the identity of the promotion kind of slowly explode over the course of a month. So Jerrett is NWA champion, the moment that we've all been waiting for. There's actually a very interesting note in Jerry's book where he says, this show is very important because I've decided that after Jeff chasing the belt for 21 weeks, it might hurt his credibility and the company's credibility for him to continue being denied. The more interesting part of that, the fact that Panda now has a controlling interest deflects what little negative could come from Jeff being an owner and also the champion. It's interesting to see that Jerry was like, because Jeff is no longer like fully in control of this company, Panda is majority shareholder, we can make him champion without the fear that there's blowback.
You know what the funniest thing about this is?
What?
The guy that they kicked out of this company is the only person I've ever seen in charge of this company with a shred of self-awareness. Like, it's so hilarious that, like, wait, this guy's thinking about things? Get him the fuck out of here.
The fact that he's thinking about, well, you know, because Panda owns the company now, we'll get less blowback from the internet.
Perspective? What?
I'm pretty sure that's not a quality people have in spades in pro wrestling, so...
But yeah, that's why we had to get him out of there. He was thinking too much about the things that we were putting on television and trying to earn money from.
I'm legitimately stunned it took 22 weeks for a guitar shot, though. Do you think they were saving it? It's like, we're going to do the first guitar shot for the title change when Jarrett wins the belt.
Yeah, but like, then they wasted it.
They gave it to Vince Russo.
Like, you could have at least had, like, you know, Russo brings it in, Killings kicks him out, guitar's in the ring, Jerrett takes the guitar, whacks it over, Killings wins the title. It's like, that's a way more satisfying payoff than Russo limply throwing it into the back of Ron's head.
Only a few people know for sure that Russo was going to be revealed as Mr. Wrestling 3. It's mostly the people in the office, so you had like Bob Ryder, Jeremy Borash, and Mortimer Plumtree. Everybody else was worked.
That's what you gotta do. Never want to build trust with your employees, alright? That's something we've got to take away from this. You never want to have trust with your employees because then that might inspire loyalty, and that's one thing you don't want in a company.
No, you never want people to be like, you know what, this is a good place to work, this is a place where I can trust my bosses, and I've never like left out in the cold or left out not knowing what's going on. That's no, you never want that. That's bad.
You want uneasiness, you want a toxic work environment, you want people to feel unsafe, you want people to think of greener pastures elsewhere, because that inspires fear. And that's how you control your backstage environment.
You never want people to know they're on a sure footing. You never want people to know that what you're telling them is actually true and not some dumb shit that you're going to use to set up an angle on the TV show. Nah, you never want any of that.
Can't trust them. Remember they were leaking stuff like 2 months ago?
So they deserve this. This is what they get.
This was their punishment for stuff that Jerry was definitely doing.
You want to leak stuff? Well, we're not going to tell you anything, and you're going to be mad at us.
Yeah, and then you're going to leave.
There's even a quote in the Torch that Jarrett was pleased that wrestlers seemed to be surprised backstage.
Well, at least it worked. It'd be more embarrassing if they were trying to keep it from everyone, and then everyone still knew.
So Jarrett's champion, Russo's on the show, which really came into more relevance on the following show, NWA TNA pay-per-view number 23, where we entered the work shoot era in full. So Mike Tenay starts the show. They cut to Mike Tenay, and Mike Tenay just does a promo about, like, this is the thing. Mike Tenay does this promo about how Vince Russo killed WCW, Vince Russo cost him his job, and he hates Vince Russo's guts. And we're telling the viewer, the person buying this show every week, that this man is responsible for the death of the second largest wrestling company in America, and now he is responsible for this company. And, like, why is the story here that the guy that's in charge is terrible?
Well, the idea here is that he's not actually in charge on camera, you know what I mean? Like, the kayfabe is that he isn't in charge. But the reality is very different, which makes the whole segment hilarious.
But, like, Vince Russo comes out after Mike Tenay threatens, and, like, if you want to know why Mike Tenay doesn't like Vince Russo, Mike Tenay was booked in a match in WCW against Medeja. Tenay refused, and because his contract said that he was an announcer and not a wrestler, they couldn't force him. But Vince Russo apparently never forgives these kind of things. But nonetheless, Mike Tenay is like, I'm not wrestling. I'm an announcer. Leave me alone.
I have no interest in smacking the back of my head against the mat a few times.
That is not a thing which is good for my brain. Therefore, I'm not going to do it.
All right, cowboy, you ready to shoot? Pew, 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 pew.
Yeah, so after Mike Tenay does his little shoot promo about how terrible Vince Russo is and how he destroys the business. My favorite part of that, by the way, is after Mike Tenay does that, they cut to Don, and Don is like, you know what, I've never met the guy. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Don doesn't pass judgment based on what other people say.
And then Mike is like, if he cost you your job, you'd know. And Don's like, you know what, that's a good point.
Also, Don's like, Mike is my friend. I will support him in his hatred of this guy.
So Vince Russo comes to the ring. Mike Tenay is meant to be doing an interview with Jeff Jarrett, and then Vince Russo interrupts him, shoves Mike Tenay out of the way, calls him bad, which is clearly the worst thing Vince Russo has ever said, is that Mike Tenay is bad at his job because he's like the best thing on these shows.
It's also really stupid that this guy comes out here and he's like, Mike, you're bad, the show's bad, everything sucks, who would pay for this shit?
It's such a reoccurring trend through all of TNA history that all they ever do, over and over again, is tell you how terrible and bad and awful the show you're watching is.
Well, we're seeing it on the Patreon series too when we're going through the Monday Night Wars. Like, what's some of half the shit that Eric Bischoff says when he's on screen is, "Oh, the company sucked."
Everything you've watched up until we took over is utterly pointless and bad. What are you doing, you stupid idiots?
Why are you spending money on this?
Even go back to the first show where like Jarrett and Hall and Shamrock came out, and it's like, the creative of this show is bad, it sucks, why are we doing this battle royal?
It's been there from the beginning, which is kind of hilarious too. That's the other biggest through line.
Like, legitimately, we're not going to put it in the show open as a noteworthy quote, but Vince Russo just says the words, "This product sucks." Those are his exact words. This product sucks.
Maybe we should put that in there, right at the end. After the Chris Rock line, where he's like, TNA is the best promotion in the world. This product sucks.
But we're actually talking about our podcast instead of...
Yeah. Yeah, that's when it says, you've got to be kidding me. This product sucks.
So Vince Russo goes full worked shoot where he's talking about the history of WCW and the history of Jeff Jarrett.
I don't even know what's worked. You know what I mean? Like, my man was just taking veiled threats at Jerry Jarrett.
Yeah, that's another one where he's like, if you cut my mic, Jerry... Jerry Jarrett's not a character on this show. Jerry Jarrett's never been on this show. Nobody who watches this TV show knows who Jerry Jarrett is. And yet, Vince Russo's like, he's threatening to smack the shit out of him if he cuts his mic. Which, to be fair, I would take that challenge. If Vince Russo's like, I'll smack the shit out of you if you do anything, I'd be like, I'll do it. You can't smack the shit out of anything.
I mean, no, we're not doing this is a fiery promo.
I'll give it to Vince Russo. It was well delivered. You can never deny him that. But the content of the promo was absolutely dreadful. Because he went through Jeff Jarrett's career where he's like, you were a nobody in the WWF, but when I got the book, I made you good. I made you a star. Then you were a nobody in WCW, and you were begging me to jump over to WCW.
Here's my promo. My promo is, I'm going to come out here. I'm going to tell you the show you're watching is bad and the promotion you're watching is bad. I'm going to tell you that the NWA World Champion is bad. Then I'm going to tell you that wrestling's fake. And then I'm going to tell you that Jeff Jarrett was bad. And then I'm going to punch an old man that you don't know.
Yeah, to be fair, threaten to punch an old man that you don't know.
Yeah. Just a cavalcade of great stuff.
It goes back to Vince Russo's core misunderstanding of pro wrestling, though, doesn't it? His core misunderstanding of why people like this thing. They want to invest in the stories and the characters and the chases for the titles. That's pro wrestling. But he constantly can't understand that, so he has to constantly tell you pro wrestling is fake. This isn't real. I'm the writer. I'm the booker. The real drama here, the real tension, the real thing that you should be interested in is the behind-the-scenes stuff, which we're going to have spill over onto the television show at all times, while we tell you that I booked this guy before and I want to book him again, and this old man backstage is stopping me from booking him again.
Well, it comes down to the core of he doesn't like pro wrestling. Really, what Vince Russo should have been doing was directing some Big Brother fucking-esque show where he was, the guy making the challenges for people on the fucking reality TV show. He shouldn't have been in pro wrestling.
But the problem is he was never a good enough writer to write any TV, so...
I'm not saying you had to write good TV. Go write road rules.
There's a reason the dude is doing a podcast these days. Like,
hey, wait a minute.
if he was good enough to write literally any TV other than pro wrestling, which he wasn't even good enough to write in the first place, but he got the job and got so many jobs that people just kept on hiring him. But if he was good enough to write TV, TV companies would have hired. There's never been more TV out there. Never more reality TV, never more non-fiction TV, never more scripted TV out there. If you can't get a writing gig, if you're a writer now, you're just not a good writer.
Ed Ferrara got a gig.
Yeah, he's teaching creative writing at Full Sail, so that he's teaching.
Yeah, you know who isn't teaching creative writing at Full Sail?
The Full Sail is no longer associated with WWE, so Ed Ferrara is not teaching the WWE writers of the future anymore.
Well, he did for like the last 4 years, so maybe that's the problem.
That's where NXT went wrong. Hiring Ed Ferrara's kids. So yeah, Russo does this full promo, and in the match afterwards, Don's like, you know what, Mike? After I saw Vince cut that promo, I know why you hate him.
Which is such a great realization. It took like literally 5 minutes.
And Mike Tenay is like, now you'll get why I wanted to quit. And Don, in like the most like charming self-deprecating thing, it's like, oh, you shouldn't quit. No one wants to see me do play-by-play. Bless Don. Don is an absolute treasure on these shows.
Someone has to be.
I will say, I did enjoy both of the Jarrett Killings matches. I don't think they're like blow away, you know, you've got to watch them, but I think they're the better heavyweight title matches they've had in this company's history so far.
I'd agree. There's nothing there that's blow away or even stuff you have to go seek out, except maybe just to see Jerrett winning his NWA title, but it was, you know, they were fine heavyweight matches. Nothing in the heavyweight division is going to touch anything in the X division at this point.
At the very least, they're better than the Shamrock matches, so it has that going for them.
You could actually probably say, like, this is as far as, like, everything, maybe even the X division, that this month had the best title matches so far.
Yeah, as you mentioned. But even the X division had two, like, Styles and Lynn bangers.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, and they had the red thing too, so like this could definitely have. You could even say that. You could probably say that all the titles had their, except for obviously Miss TNA, which wasn't defended.
Tug on your collar. So yeah, Jarrett beat Killings to win the title, and then to close off the story for the month, Jarrett defeated Killings in the rematch to retain the title, where he was not refusing to take the guitar from Russo again. So the story here, the tension is that Vince Russo wants to help Jeff Jarrett, but Jeff Jarrett doesn't want his help.
Wish that was real life.
Yeah, it is a weird inversion of like the real life situation where Vince Russo wants to help Jeff Jarrett. His dad doesn't want Vince Russo to help Jeff Jarrett, but Jeff Jarrett desperately wants Vince Russo to help Jeff Jarrett. They even did an angle after the match where Dave Meltzer reported, nobody knows this story, but they're figuring it'll get reported and everyone will know. Killings came back in the dressing room screaming that Russo was shooting on him by punching him for real in the ring. He looked to be throwing these windmill blows that were connecting, but he's not a trained worker. So they're even trying to do like these angles where it's like Killings is faking being mad at Vince Russo for quote unquote shooting on him. But
God,
nobody
this
cares.
Is such stupid shit.
It's always stupid. Like all this, the worked shoot stuff is just not. It just does not understand pro wrestling. And even when they're good, even when there's a good worked shoot promo, it never lasts and turns into anything good. It's just like you get the one. Even if you liked Vince Russo on this second show, like even if you're like, you know what, he cut that promo with fire and passion. It was well delivered. And if he said that to me, I wouldn't disagree because it is well delivered. But it goes nowhere. It never goes anywhere. And they keep doing stuff like this.
I think it's because fans can immediately tell if something's genuine or not. And to do something like this with Ron backstage, people just aren't going to buy it. Like, when things come out from backstage and they're legitimate, that does get fan excitement. Like, how many years do people want fucking Riddle and Lesnar or Riddle and Goldberg just because they heard the backstage stories of Riddle, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's... not all the backstage stories are Riddle. But now it's like, if it's something that isn't genuine and it's something planned, especially with Russo on TV, you're gonna roll your eyes and not think it's real because you can have some modicum of critical thought. Oh, you want to talk about Mike Tenay's best call?
Yeah, we didn't even mention the Mike Tenay call where Vince Russo unmasks himself. Don West drops a "You've got to be kidding me," because of course he does, and then Mike Tenay delivers the line, "Oh shit, it's Vince Russo," with like the fury and anger of everybody watching, and I believe everybody in the back.
Did Tenay know?
Well, he's not listed among the people that did know.
So that could have been a very real... Oh shit, it's Vince Russo.
A very personal, organic reaction from Mike Tenay to seeing Vince Russo on the television show that he has to work and call for the rest of his life.
Hilarious.
It's such a good delivery. It's such a good, it's the perfect response. You know, it's the time is just like, oh, could it be? You know, that kind of stuff. The inorganic, I'm feigning excitement, where Mike Tenay is just like, oh shit, it's Vince Russo. So later on that show, Vince Russo comes out because Roddy Piper did not let him do his rebuttal. So like there's a match, and then Russo comes out the segment after that.
That's the classic NWA TNA Russo structure.
Yeah, they do it multiple times this month, where it's like Russo opening promo match, Russo second promo.
2 matches, Russo back again, Russo backstage segment.
Russo doing something in main event. That really is the structure
Russo
of the show.
chops down logo.
So yeah, later in the show, he comes out and he starts cutting his promo about how dare Roddy Piper invoke the name of Owen Hart to beat him with a stick, and then he creates formally Sports Entertainment Extreme, or S.E.X, if you will.
Hell yeah, baby. Or as he says, Sports Entertainment Extreme. Spell it out.
Yeah, he doesn't even say the word sex, but I did find online a Sports Entertainment Extreme t-shirt during the week, which I have since bought.
Fuck you! I was the one who wanted to buy the Sports Entertainment Extreme t-shirt.
Listen, you gotta get there quick.
Ah, bastard.
Now the proud owner of a S.E.X shirt.
I'm gonna bootleg it.
We should make our own. Just steal the t-shirt.
Yeah, why not? Everyone does it now.
This is the segment where Russo calls Athena into the ring, and he starts demeaning her and says, you're only tits and ass, and not even, he starts mocking the size of her breasts and saying all she should do to get attention in this industry is show off her boobs. And yeah, that's your healthy dose of misogyny for the month.
This is the weakest S.E.X show so far. S.E.X was much more prevalent and much stronger in the last 2 shows of the month.
Some weak ass sex going on here on December 4th.
Yeah. Listen, and as a S.E.X addict, I'm gonna keep note of when the S.E.X is good, when the S.E.X is bad. Get ready for 8 shows of this.
Listen, that's again not our fault.
I mean, it's right there. You can't not do it.
So yeah, Russo cuts his promo. He's the thing. Like, Russo clearly thinks he's the coolest guy on earth here. Which I think makes it all the worse.
I think, you know, comparatively, he might be. He might just be the biggest, like, he's like a dirtbag uncle. Who, like, when you're 8 and don't understand ethics, you're like, oh man, this guy's cool as hell. He drinks beer and drives cars.
Yeah, and like, there isn't a ton of really good promos on these shows, and like, say what you will about the content of what he says, the delivery is also always quite good.
Yeah. That's the problem too. It's like, sometimes he'll have like these one-liners, and you'll be like, ooh, alright, that was pretty good. And then you're like, damn it, no, don't praise him.
And I think that's like the most frustrating thing about this entire angle, that like there is a version of this story that is probably really good and works really well. If they can like rein it in, if they're not doing all the work shoot stuff, if Russo is just this invading force trying to introduce this sleaze and debauchery to wrestling, and you get the likes of Piper and the likes of the Road Warriors standing up to him being like, no, that's not what wrestling is. But then so much of it is just like, all right, we're going to demean Athena, and we're going to talk about Owen Hart, and we're going to talk about what happened in WCW, and we're going to talk about what happened in the WWF, and all these behind-the-scenes antics. And that's where they just lose the thread. It's like, now it's just not a story anymore, even if the core idea of the story actually isn't that bad.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about when we were talking about the Piper segment. It's just, you have a very simple, effective story there, and you're muddling it up with a lot of stuff that doesn't matter.
And like the strangest part is during this Russo promo where he's introducing S.E.X, he talks again. Listen, we were going to be saying the words
when he's initiating sex.
He is in fact initiating sex. We're going to use the word sex so casually in sentences that it's just going to.
It's just a bit of casual sex.
It's going to become second nature. So like he's cutting this.
You never want to come second with sex.
God damn it. So he's cutting this promo, and he's constantly mentioning the old man in the ivory tower and the old man backstage who doesn't want you to see this and that, and the old man. And again, like, we've never seen Jerry on this show. In fact, there's a note in the Wrestling Observer that like Russo, Mike Tenay, and all these people are actively told never to say Jerry Jarrett's name. Like, what's even the point of them cutting all these promos if we can't even say the words Jerry Jarrett?
But like, even in the event that you do, what's the payoff here? Is Russo gonna wrestle Jerry?
A non-wrestler against a 60-odd-year-old man.
You're like, yeah, there's no... That's, I think, what the problem with the whole Russo thing in general is like, I mean, you're not gonna get like some big blow-off with Russo wrestling anyone. Like, it's not gonna be good if it does happen. Like, it feels like there's a lot of aimless talking, and that there's... I don't think... Alright, I'll pose this as a question to you then. Do you think as of December 4, 2002, they have a plan for how this whole thing is going to blow off?
No, not even close.
That's the problem. If you don't know where you're ending up, you don't know how to fill the space in between.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have a story, you get your broad outlines of the story, you do, here's the hero, here's the thing he goes through, here's the achievement, and then he comes back to the start again. Like, that's the whole point of telling a story. You need to have a clear direction of all the major points, including the end, for it to actually come across as a story.
Yeah.
With cohesion.
So later in the show, we get Jarrett against the Harris brothers in the main event before BG James does a big swerve and he joins S.E.X.
He swiveled the hips and joined S.E.X.
I cannot believe that we would have a swerve on this wrestling show. Though I guess it makes more sense, like, given he hated Ron on all of these shows, then he comes out and he hits Ron with a chair. So I suppose it's consistent in a way.
And, you know, there was a decent amount of tension heading into it where it's like, oh, you know, I'll side with Jarrett because my dad asked me to. So it's like, oh, alright, at least... See, it's weird. It's like, this isn't a company where you would expect, like, any levels of, like, nuance to anything, but it's like, oh, of course he wouldn't just, like, accept to be the tag partner of... Because, like, the Dead Ready thing would have been, like, Jeff walks up to him backstage and says, hey, brother, I know we don't like each other, but we should team up tonight because the Harris brothers, they're bad. And they'd be like, alright, blah, 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 and then he'd swivel the hips. At least they went to the extent of having, like, well, why would he team with Jerrett? Well, if he's dad ass, you know?
Yeah, why would he even go out there? Because, yeah, the show was built around Bob Armstrong asking Jarrett Killings and BG to be like, I want you to be my soldiers in this war against sex. Listen, we know Bob's not anti-sex. Look at all his kids. So,
yeah.
He's a hypocrite here.
Definitely, like, the rival of sex should have been abstinence. And then make some giant acronym.
That show then ended, by the way, with Paul Bearer coming out.
I guess.
He has joined... It's very weird that, like, Paul Bearer, who goes by Percy Pringle in TNA, the demonic cult leader man who leads The Undertaker to the ring, is one of the defenders of tradition in the NWA on this TNA show.
Yep.
Don't think that makes a ton of sense, but listen, he's not around very long, so I guess we'll go with it.
Hey, if I get like one segment of him and James Mitchell talking, it'll all be worth it.
Yeah, it's weird. The Harris Bros, when they joined S.E.X, they cut this promo about like how we've been held back. We're not given the opportunities we deserve here. It's like you lose most of your matches. What are you talking about?
Well, that's the point that we didn't even really get into with the whole Vince Russo stuff. It's like every single one of these promos too. They're like WWF this, WCW that, WWF this, WCW, WWF, WCW, WCW, and also this show sucks. So it's like, not only are we only going to talk about a company that doesn't exist, a company that's way out of our league, and then we're also going to say at every opportunity how bad the show is that you pay to see weekly. Not even a show you get for free weekly. A show you have to pay to watch weekly.
Feels like a recipe for success.
It feels like a recipe for fucking something.
So, what happened on the next show with S.E.X?
Tony Mamaluke defeat Jason Cross before S.E.X.
That is a sentence in the show notes. So yeah, the big thing about this one is that Russo's not there, so like BG is the stand-in for Russo, but then it turns out Russo is there when he costs Hennig the world title main event.
Fucking swerve.
Which is a fun story because, again, they did the thing where they worked all of the fans in the audience for no reason whatsoever. So Russo was telling friends he was really mad on the December 11th show because Jarrett wanted to swerve everybody, so he had Russo sit in the car in the parking lot all night so none of the wrestlers would know that he was there and he wasn't allowed out of his car and into the arena until the end of the show.
I like how he couldn't even go to like a Waffle House and just eat something and then drive up and walk in. Jarrett's like, no, stay in the car.
Like, you can't leave the car. Somebody might see you outside, know that you're here, and we'd be lying.
Go hang out with Billy Ray Cyrus for a bit. Jesus.
Everybody knows when you're told somebody is not at a wrestling show, you know they're actually at the wrestling show. Like, everybody knows this. But they were like, oh, we gotta work not only the fans, but the wrestlers again by pretending Russo isn't here tonight, and they'll all be shocked when he shows up.
If this was happening in 2021, you 100% know Russo would have faked a COVID thing.
Oh, no.
And been like, oh, I'm not on the show, I've got COVID, I can't be. And then he'd be like, I'm here, I never had COVID. Doesn't even exist, Don't know if he's an anti-COVID guy.
So then the last show of the month, there's once again a lot of sex. So...
Hell yeah. Sex up and down the card.
Curt Hennig comes out to open the show because he's really mad about the fact that Sex cost him the world title match the week prior. Elix Skipper, Christopher Daniels, and Loki return to officially join Sex, where then Vince Russo later
Triple X
does a promo talking about how, like, oh, TNA didn't want to book around Loki's 0-1 schedule.
Which we know from earlier episodes of the podcast.
Indeed. So they're incorporating fact into the story. It's almost like it's a worked shoot.
Being as we are so heavily dissecting what's happening in the background of the show, little things like that I actually appreciate. Because I'm like, I knew that.
And like, those are the kind of thing that, like, because wrestling always does work reality in some ways. Because wrestling is like 1/3 sports, 1/3 scripted drama, 1/3 reality TV. It's like those three genres mashed together into this weird mismatch of those ideas.
I think the problems arise when it's two of one thing and then one of another and none of the other thing.
When they lose that balance and it just ends up being too much like not wrestling. But
yeah.
So, like, there's always an element of reality. So when you include things like, oh, the company's too cheap to fly Daniels in from LA because that's an expensive flight, I'm okay with that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, all right, that gives like a character motivation as opposed to something that's just like, oh, and Daniels was screwed in WCW, you know?
I also think it's interesting to note that this is stuff that I think delivers better with 2021 eyes looking back than stuff I would have been watching at the time. I don't know if I'm watching like, NWA TNA pay-per-view 26 live and I'm like, oh man, that's cool. But like actually, doing it in a structure like this where we're digging deep into what's happening behind the scenes already, that's the kind of stuff I appreciate. But like, if I didn't know the stuff, would I like these segments as much? Probably not. But I think I would still like them more than the wow WWF, wow WCW, wow stuff.
Well, speaking of the wow stuff, Jerrett comes out.
Wow.
It's literally a theme song.
There you go.
So the big tension here is that, well, Russo wants Jerrett to join S.E.X, but Jerrett is reluctant to join S.E.X. If you remember the NWA title match, Russo revealed himself to be Mr. Wrestling 3 to cost Killings the title to have Jarrett win the title. On the December 11th show, Russo once again cost Hennig the title match to help Jarrett retain the title, and even Russo helped Jarrett retain against Killings in the title rematch. So Russo has been repeatedly helping Jarrett despite Jarrett's insistence that he doesn't want Russo's help. So here we go again, Jarrett comes out, he cuts a promo. Russo offers him the spot in S.E.X. Jarrett turns it down and cuts a promo about how, like, oh, back in WCW, Goldberg and Shawn Michaels in WWF wanted to rip your guts out, but I talked them down, and it's all this, like, WCW and WWF insider baseball shite that nobody could possibly care about.
And like, the thing is, like, you could almost forgive it if the crowd was going nuts for any of this, but as soon as the other companies are mentioned, they just don't give a shit anymore.
They just completely, like, zone out.
Yeah, like, when it's stuff that involves TNA, they're into it. Like, it's like, oh, sports and entertainment in TNA, better than this wrestling show. Like, people, they pop for that, but, like, as soon as you start deviating into the other company stuff, beyond just, like, I'm going to say the words Degeneration X, and the crowd goes, woo! Like, beyond that, you're not getting anything from them, either.
Yeah, and it's so strange. Like, the crowd reactions are so all over the place for everything that happens on these shows, because if you go back to that Athena segment where he's, like, demeaning Athena, which he's meant to be getting heat for, because, like, he's a man being bullying and disrespecting a woman. Like, when he's like, do you want to see your tits? Like, some of the crowd are like, yeah. It's like, oh.
That's the thing, is like, well, from the start, you always knew there was going to be that kind of dynamic with the crowd being into the Russo stuff, because he goes like, you guys want to see fucking beating up women? And the crowd goes, fuck yeah, we do.
And the last major sex segment of the month. Loki, Daniels, and Skipper defeated Amazing Red in the SATs in the main event of the third show of the month, the December 18th pay-per-view, in honestly probably one of the best matches in TNA history up to this point.
Absolute fucking banger.
It's just such a great match where it's like Loki, Daniels, and Skipper are back, 3 exceptional wrestlers. Red and the SATs are like the perfect underdogs, and they just do this great match. It has one of the best heat segments I've ever seen in wrestling where they're working over Red.
I was going to say, like, you obviously have all of the X Division high-flying shenanigans that you'd hope, and you'd have the crispness of your Daniels and Key in there as well. But the thing that's most notable is just a tremendous heat segment on Red, where you are living and dying by it. And it helps that, you know, you got Don West climbing on top of the announce table and screaming in support of Red the entire time, because you believe that it's legitimate, and you believe that this dude is, like, living and dying by Red right now because Red is his favorite wrestler in the whole fucking world. So you have that aspect playing into it too, but, like, just tremendously worked match this.
Yeah, that Don West moment where he loses himself in the match as Red is like making his comeback and he's just chanting, "Go Red, go." He gets up on the announce table and he just emotionally loses himself in the match is such a wonderful moment that you don't see on commentary. You know, normally they do try to be like, commentators are supposed to be the unbiased observers here who are supposed to call the match down the middle, as opposed to Don West who's just like, this guy rules, I love him, this match rules, it's the best thing I've ever seen in my life, I'm just going to go bonkers for it. And he spent like the last 10 minutes of the match standing on the announce table.
Well, you know what I think it is? I think bias on a face commentator can be endearing, while bias on a heel commentator is annoying.
And the interesting thing is, like, they do bias in the heel commentator way more than they do bias in the face commentator.
Because it's cheap. It's easy to do. Because to do it with a face commentator or announcer, you need to have goodwill with the audience. They need to be liked already. They need to be charming so that the crowd doesn't turn on them for being obviously biased. There's a whole lot more factors in doing it, and it only works for certain people. It works for Don West, it works for Mike Tenay, it works for Tony Schiavone. Like, you need to be exceptional talents in that kind of way for it to play off. Otherwise it comes off as like disingenuous, or even makes the face announcers look bad because they're taking sides. The problem, like, and the reason it's so overused with heel guys, is just you can have any dickhead out there say, "Oh, I don't like this guy." Like, and then there's nothing at risk there. There's nothing at play there. It's all surface level bullshit. With a face, you have to kind of dig in and add some layers beyond that, and you have to work for it a little bit, which I think is why it also comes across much better when it does work.
Yeah, if the entire sex angle was just matches like this. Matches like Loki, Daniels, and Skipper against Red and the SATs, like giving a framework and emotional investment into matches featuring very good wrestlers, thumbs up. Sadly, wasn't always matches like this, as illustrated by the person who debuted after this match, the big new member of Sports Entertainment Extreme, David Flair.
I mean, just hilarious, right?
Yeah, David Flair comes out because Hennig comes out at the end of the show to try and beat up S.E.X again, but then David Flair, son of Rick, makes his TNA debut, gets Hennig in the figure 4, sits there for like 2 minutes. It actually it popped me because there's a ton of people like around him brawling and fighting and all that, and he's just still sitting there in his figure 4 for 2 minutes.
And then Jerrett beats him up and puts him in it, which is great. I don't know, I'm not going to shit on David Flair being brought in for this. I think it's funny.
It is, but like the problem is it becomes a lot more about wrestlers like David Flair than it becomes about wrestlers like Loki. And if it stayed being about wrestlers like Loki, it probably would have been a much better angle than David Flair and some of the people who will follow David Flair in the months to come.
So David Flair is a Russo guy, I assume?
Well, I'd imagine so. He's in S.E.X.
I mean, sure. But then anyone can be invited to S.E.X. That's not like a restrictive policy.
That's true too. Look at the group of people they already have.
They're very open in S.E.X, you know.
Open relationships up here at Sports Entertainment Extreme.
Well, as we see with Every Man's Desire.
Indeed. We'll talk about that when we get to the X Division. So the last show of the month ends with the symbolism of Vince Russo on Sports Entertainment Extreme destroying the Asylum. They cut up the banners on the guardrails, they attack the ring aprons, and most famously and most notably, Vince Russo gets an axe and starts chopping down the TNA sign.
I really thought it was going to fall on him.
I hoped it would have been so funny if it fell on him.
I really wanted it to fall on him. I thought that'd be so fucking funny. Or even if it just bumped him on the head.
Yeah, him as a heel should have been like, "Oh, let it fall on me and then I'll do a little pratfall."
Yeah, but him as a coward.
Yeah, he's like, I gotta be a cool guy on TV all the time.
Yeah. See, honestly, I think a lot of this like sex stuff would be more tolerable if Russo was willing to fall on his ass a little bit more, and not just be cool, serious shooter guy all the time. Like if he was just, oh, I get beat up and I look like a dope. I feel like it would deliver a lot more.
Yep. So that's all the sex stuff for the month. It ends with the very clear symbolism of Russo chopping down TNA with an axe.
R.I.P. to the OG logo.
S.E.X, the original Nexus.
Sexist. Tenay, killed him.
So yeah, the second pay-per-view of the month, let's go into it, why not? The NWA TNA pay-per-view number 8, January 15th, 2003. That show opened with a sit-down interview between Mike Tenay and Vince Russo. It was about 6 minutes, where they talked all about what the role of a wrestling writer is. Vince Russo talked about his philosophy toward pro wrestling. They talked about David Arquette winning the WCW World title. And as you mentioned, Tenay massacred him. Because by all accounts, this segment was set up as a shoot, where it's like Mike Tenay will actually interview Vince Russo. So Mike Tenay did all this research and preparation. They sat down. He did the interview where Russo was just not prepared for all the questions Mike Tenay had, and Russo fell flat in his face and looked like an idiot.
And you can tell, it was going to be a shoot from the beginning because of the demeanor of both guys.
They do not like each other. That's, by all accounts, they are working here, because the story is that they're playing that natural tension they have against each other. But that is natural tension. These men do not like each other.
And I would say that this is one of the most famous things to come out of Russo's on-screen stuff in the company.
Yeah, the famous Lucha Libras quote.
Just Lucha Libras, go to Japan. That has to be added to the intro.
We'll add the Lucha Libras to the intro. I might have to bump something, because we're running up close toward the amount you can actually squeeze into the intro, but I'll make it work.
We'll have to add some more. We'll have to add more song.
I can't extend the intro. I can't extend the opening track, but then that would require me to re-download it. But either way, I guess that's worth doing. But yeah, Tenay, Vince Russo was like, hey, you want your Lucha Libras? You go to Japan. You go to Mexico. I don't know, wherever. And Lucha Libras, he said, rather than Lucha Libre. So I assume he's talking about luchas with the star sign Libra.
As everyone pointed out in the mentions of your wonderful tweet, he was just talking about Dragon Gate.
Oh yeah, or he was predicting the future Fantastica Mania tour.
Yeah. So, and it's an amazing clip. I think in the intro we should cut it after the Japan bit. You want your Lucha Libras? Go to Japan.
It is fascinating, and it's one of those things that if you analyze it as part of the television show, it's absolutely inane. That they're going on the show where he's saying, he says multiple times, this company's going to shut down. I need to save this company. The product is awful. The show is terrible. The job of the writers is to make the show compelling. He calls the world title a prop. All those things, within the universe of NWA TNA, are absolutely absurd to put a character on the show to say, but it becomes, captivating television to watch.
I said on Twitter, I was like, watching this as someone doing a podcast in 2021 is awesome, and I kind of love it. But if I was watching it at the time, I would have just been very confused and probably turned off by it.
Yeah, so the big moment is where Mike Tenay raises the David Arquette thing. It's well, how can you justify putting the World Championship on David Arquette? And then Mike Tenay, Vince Russo responds, his justification for it is, oh, they got the front page of USA Today, which we never did.
He doesn't even say the front page. He just says it's in the USA Today.
Yeah, which, you can get coverage in USA Today. You can ask yourself the question, is it good coverage?
Then you can ask yourself the question, well, as Mike Tenay follows it up, the ratings didn't improve because of it, so it doesn't even fucking matter.
Yeah, so the actual numbers from May 1st, 2001, which was, I believe, the Nitro after we won the belt, were 7.4 to 2.46, which was the second highest rating in Raw history, and should be noted that was nearly 8 months after Russo had left the company, and it was also the biggest differential between Raw and Nitro in the 6-year history of the Monday Night Wars. On top of that, Arquette's next title defense on pay-per-view drew the lowest buy rate in the history of WCW. So...
See, that's the problem, right? I can't see... How can you be so into your own shit that seeing numbers like that and it doesn't make you question your choices?
Because he doesn't like wrestling. It really just comes down to that.
That's fair, but how do you how do you look at those numbers and go, oh, well, my vision of what this thing is right still, this is my call completely, and it's what I think is a good idea, and then it clearly wasn't a good idea because it didn't pay off in any measurable fact. And it's how can you look at that and still go, my ideas are correct?
Because at the end of the day, people are always like, Vince Russo is a story guy, not a wrestling guy. And he's not. Like, the thing Vince Russo does, above all else, like, the thing he prioritizes is, can he get your attention in a single moment? Like, that's all he cares about. And there's not, like, that's not an entirely, like, ridiculous philosophy toward wrestling. Like, in theory, trying to get the attention of the audience in any given moment is a good idea. But Russo's way of doing that is just shock. All he can do is shock you, so that you pay attention. You might get he might get attention from him, and that's all he wants. He just wants the shock, which is the reason his justification for it is, oh well, we got covered in USA Today. That's it. Did it make money? Did people watch? No. Did it get attention? Yes. Therefore, it's successful.
You got attention for one day.
And the wrong kind of attention. Most people laughing at it and burying it, and look how ridiculous that this B-tier actor has become world heavyweight champion in wrestling. Because that's the thing as well, like, it's David Arquette, who is having, like, a small little moment for himself, coming off Ready to Rumble. Obviously, not that, really, but coming off Scream, mostly. That people would have had, like, an okay idea of who David Arquette was. But, like, it's not like it was Jay Leno, or, like, Karl Malone, or Dennis Rodman.
It should have been Rodman, if they were gonna strap up any celebrity.
Like, when you look at the actual celebrities that WCW had in the wrestling ring in the 90s, like, Jay Leno's a better world champion than David Arquette. But it's David Arquette, the B-tier celebrity that you just put the world title on. Well done. Yeah, that interview, it's absolutely fascinating to watch. It's just, like, Russo gets torn to shreds by Mike Tenay.
I honestly recommend anyone going out there and just watching it, just to see it, because it's a really interesting time capsule.
Yeah, it is the very first thing on the NWA TNA pay-per-view from January 15, 2003. So turn that show on, it'll be the first thing you see. The February 26th show is built around Jeff Jarrett joining S.E.X. Russo has convinced him. Russo tells us that Jeff Jarrett has seen the light, he has finally joined S.E.X. And he's going to reveal why in the main event segment with a big welcome home Jeff banner. And then they play a tape where it's Vince Russo's kids, Will, and I believe BJ is the name of his other son. They cut a promo about how bad a father Vince Russo is. His shoot children are put on the screen. Like, his oldest son, I think, seems like 15, 16. The younger one seems like 8, 9, 10-ish.
The older one's a work of.
That's the thing. Like, it's a good promo. Fair play to him. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. He's a good promo like his dad. Where he cuts this promo about how Vince was never around. He moved them from Connecticut to Atlanta when he went to work for WCW. And then all of his friends and stuff were left behind in Connecticut. And they'd go see movies as a family, but Russo would get a phone call and leave, and he'd miss the whole movie. And he was like, Dad, I love you, but you're not around for this family. I have very conflicted feelings about this, because if you think about it, I think it's pretty effective, but I'm also like, what's the point of this?
I think, well, it's just to further the whole, like, Jarrett Russo stuff, but I think it's interesting. I think it's pretty compelling. I also think that the live crowd did not give a single fuck nor shit about it.
Oh yeah, the worst part is when they cut back to Russo live, before Russo does this promo about how his kids suck, the crowd are actually chanting boring, and you can hear them chanting boring underneath Will Russo's promo, which is a shame. Again, a good promo. A very great line in the Wrestling Observer from Dave. There's 2 very good sassy lines in the Wrestling Observer from Dave this month. But this one, Russo's son did a taped promo similar to the David Flair deal, saying his father was never home, except Will delivered a good promo.
Yeah, and, you know, as we want to say too, just further biting off of Brian Lawler's gimmick.
Yeah, there's a lot of Brian Lawler characters on the show. A lot of sons giving out about their fathers.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that. I'm sure.
It happens multiple times this month. Never mind every other month.
It also ends with a big angle too, so
involving Brian Lawler, which we'll again get to in a moment. Russo then responded to his kids, and he called his kids ungrateful shits. And he was like,
one of them a freak.
He did. He called his younger son a freak. And he was like, I let you stay up to watch Howard Stern. I went down and got you out of trouble when you were in trouble in school, and I gave out to your principal. And it's like, all of the things he illustrated are like bad parenting.
I think that's meant to be the bit, though, isn't it?
Probably. That's like, how dare you be ungrateful for my bad parenting.
I let you host poker tournaments in the house after school. And, of course, he ends it with the strongest line of, yeah, well, alright, when I get home, I am gonna go into your room, and I'm gonna beat the shit out of you.
He does, in fact, threaten child abuse here on national pay-per-view. I wonder, was there people who were like... Because, famously, when Vince McMahon was blown up in his limo on Raw, Donald Trump called Titan Tower as being like, hey, did Vince just die on TV?
That's a guy that was in charge of a country.
Yeah, he was elected by the people to run a country. Great job, America. But I do wonder, was there people who watched this who's like, oh, Vince Russo has threatened to beat his children here on television, I better call Child Protective Services.
No, it's 2003, no one cares.
The Trump one was 2007.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, I mean, they may have thought it was legitimate, they didn't give a shit.
No one cares for poor Vince Russo's kids.
Yeah, and everyone fucking punched their kids in the head in 2003. I think it was just accepted part of the culture.
Okay.
Not saying it was right or wrong. I mean, it was wrong, but,
I don't know. I think you're saying that this is an acceptable behavior. This is an acceptable response for Vince Russo here toward his children, bearing their souls to him.
Hey, Garrett, I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to beat the shit out of you like I've never done before.
I think everybody who listens to this should call the police on it.
Which one?
The Irish police. Get them on the plane. So this segment does end with Jerrett coming out. He spears Russo before the new stable of David Flair, Brian Lawler, and Eric Watts show up. The amazing fail-son stable of second-generation stars nobody ever wanted to see have combined their forces to attack Jeff Jarrett, the second-generation son, who I guess people kind of want to see.
You should have seen the moment of realization when I was like, they're all second generation. Ah, Jarrett's second generation. Ah, we just had Vince Russo's kid on the fucking screen. I was like, wow.
Actually, I think Jarrett might be third generation, but still, either way.
Whatever, doesn't matter. But like, yeah, I'm following the Russo kid stuff too. I was like, this is art. This is the closest we've gotten to art in this company.
So we do have a recurring through line in TNA history of it's about people with daddy issues.
Yeah.
Jeff has daddy issues with Jerry, and he's picking sides with Russo, who has daddy issues with Will, who is taking sides with Jarrett, who is feuding with Flair and Lawler and Watts, who all have daddy issues. Wow, what a story running through here, this TNA.
This company's pretty hot. It's got Jarrett versus Watts, Lawler, and Flair.
Oh, yeah, look at the names everybody wants to hear. It's like me booking Steamboat against Flair in my draft show.
Yeah. Tricking the people.
That's all you need to put on the marquee. You don't need to say it's David. You just need to say it's Flair. AJ Styles versus Raven versus Jeff Jarrett for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. They spent 5 weeks, Liam. 5 weeks building to Disco Inferno against Jeff Jarrett. And then did Styles, Raven, and Jarrett, where Styles wins the title on a 1-week build.
So, for those who listened to the watch along, know that this went down very well with me.
I don't think anything in TNA history. We've covered a year of TNA now. And we've covered 6 months of 2010. We're doing Ring Cat King. We've done all this so far. Nothing broke you as much as the end of this match.
And I think what...
You cannot find the words.
It's just truly a baffling choice. Like, not only to make the first world title that AJ Styles wins this nonsense, and not only to make it him as a heel, you make AJ Styles, like, defining moment in this company at this point. His biggest achievement. Like, the guy that you... Like, one of 2 people that you signed at the start of the company. The guy that, much to everyone's, they didn't know this or they don't choose to believe this. Like, that first show was about AJ Styles, right? This whole year has been about AJ Styles, right? It's your guy. Firmly your guy. You've brought him up to this level. He's competing for the NWA title. He is winning the NWA title. This should be a big, giant, crowning moment for the company because it proves that you can raise up your own talent against all these ex-WWE, ex-WCW, ex-ECW guys, and you make it about Vince Russo. Blatantly about Vince Russo. And then the next week, he's crowning it's AJ Styles, new NWA champion. The whole segment is about Vince Russo. There's a point in that segment where Vince Russo literally steps in front of him to cut the promo. Because this is about Vince Russo. And I don't even mind Vince Russo being a focal point on the show because I think Vince Russo is a charismatic character. But this is the same thing that we saw with the 2010 AJ Flair stuff where it's Flair eating up AJ's push. This is Vince Russo eating up AJ's push, which is way worse because it's Vince Russo and not Ric Flair. This is so stupid. Like, to make AJ Styles' TNA crowning moment about Vince Russo, it's unfathomable. There's no reason to do this. You can have the swerve, but still make it about AJ. And probably don't do it in his first title win. His first world title win. It's very silly. You watch it and it's impossible to like... I know that Russo has his defenders, trust me, I've been talking to him. But I don't think there's any defense of this. Unless you liked it. And then you're like, come on, defend it.
Well, it's very good for AJ. No, there really is no defense of it. Like, the booking of AJ in like 2003, basically since he went heavyweight, where he started feuding with Jarrett, lost to Jarrett, had that like weird feud with Larry Zbyszko. He had like a tag team with D'Lo Brown that broke up for no reason. And then like 2 weeks after they broke up that tag team, we didn't mention it, AJ did become number one contender by beating D'Lo in a very good match, by the way. That AJ D'Lo match on the June 4th match, that match rocked.
And, Raven helped him win.
Yeah, Raven helped him win. Then Raven got into the match because Jarrett promised him a title match, which is why it became a triple threat. And, like, the booking of Styles, he just turns. Like, he was a heel for the first, 4 months of the year, then turned babyface to team with D'Lo, agreed to break up with D'Lo, turned heel again. And I'm just like, why would anybody on earth care about AJ Styles? This is not his last turn of the year either, by the way. So you can look forward to more AJ turns.
Yeah, but, I can't even get mad at that because that's the structure of the show. There's no stable face or heel, even though that's apparently the new direction of the company.
But it's just they didn't build to this. Like, they just didn't.
They fucked up the two biggest moments that they had for their homegrown guys. Amazing Red winning the X Division title and AJ Styles winning the NWA title. Both of them were overshadowed by outside bullshit.
And, they spent 4 weeks building to Gilberti getting a title shot. And then just decided to put the belt on AJ. 2 months ago, AJ was a guy who couldn't beat Mike Sanders in a tag team match, and a guy who lost to Glenn Gilberti. They did nothing to prepare him for this, other than they decided, maybe even this week, I don't know, let's just put the belt on AJ. And honestly, I think it's a little bit of spite from Jeff Jarrett, that's like, let's put the belt on AJ instead of Raven. It's like, and Raven can't give out. It's like, oh, we're pushing the young guy. You can't give out about that, can you, Raven? And I really do think it's like Jarrett is so reluctant to put over Raven, who they don't get along with, even though there's a note that they have a clear the air meeting this week or this month. But they still clearly don't get along, and Jarrett would rather not drop the belt to Raven, so he decides to drop it to Styles instead out of spite.
I'm gonna spitefully put over the future.
Yeah, it's just, we should mention Shane Douglas made his TNA debut in this match.
Which I'm happy about, because he feels like a name.
Yeah, so the franchise showed up to take Raven out of the match, so it came down to Styles and Jarrett, and then Russo showed up, did the swerve for the third straight goddamn week.
Fucking swerve.
So Raven against Gilberti, swerved on Raven to side with Gilberti. Gilberti against Jarrett, swerved on Gilberti to side with Jarrett. And then Styles, Raven, Jarrett, swerved on Jarrett to side with Styles.
What a cohesive show with an emphasis on faces and heels.
If you're AJ and you're looking at this guy, and you're like, all right, so he's turned on literally everybody he's ever had an association with in this company.
And even in real life.
He's trying to stab Jeff Jarrett in the back in real life. He's already stabbed Jerry Jarrett in the back in real life. And literally, the story this month is that Vince Russo owns the Sports Entertainment Extreme trademark, and he's not allowing Glenn Gilberti, Mike Sanders, the Harris brothers, Sonny Siaki to use it.
To be fair, this is a good in-character thing to say, but it annoys me because of the real life stuff. The next show, after this, he cuts a promo about loyalty.
Oh, yeah. Stupid. So he turns on literally everybody. And AJ's like, oh, yeah, this is my guy.
He needs Larry Z to come back and slap some fucking sense into him.
Larry Z beating the shit out of Vince Russo would be very enjoyable.
And take an AJ back.
So that brings us to NWA TNA pay-per-view number 50, June 18th, 2003. Where Vince Russo comes to the ring.
Yeah, with a brand new haircut.
Oh, it's the worst haircut I've ever seen in my life. I fixated on this haircut in the watch along for a very long time.
And I guess we should bust it out here. Brand new stage too for the anniversary show, because this is the first time you really see it.
The complete new presentation. It's a very like a classic 90s stage in a lot of ways. It has that like industrial feel to it.
In 2003.
Yeah, so like the original TNA stage was very like 1989, and now their 2003 update is very like 1999.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of extra props from some like sci-fi. I said Star Trek on the thing, but I think it's like a little more low budget. Like what's the one with the gates?
Stargate?
Yeah, Stargate. It feels like Stargate extras.
They got a bunch of props from the Stargate and just threw them together and formed a stage.
Yeah, feels like that.
But they are very slowly making their way toward a modern stage.
Yeah. I like that there's always been the two entrances. I appreciate that consistency.
That's a TNA staple right up until... Actually, no, pre-Hogan Bischoff did they get rid of. No, it's a Hogan Bischoff thing they get rid of. So yeah, Hogan and Bischoff again. TNA staple for the entire history. 2 tunnels. Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff. Nah, no more tunnels. The tunnels only got you so far, bro.
But like the thing about the tunnels is like people love the tunnels. That's what's so good about like the beginning of AEW. It was an amalgamation of a bunch of stuff that wrestling fans just liked. That it's like, hey,
Yeah.
what did people like about like peak TNA? Oh, the tunnels were really cool. Let's bring the tunnels in.
And it makes more sense when you realize the head of AEW's production is Keith Mitchell, who was the head of TNA's production at the very beginning.
And look, the tunnels have become like a fabled storyline tool now. Which is like tremendous.
Well, it was always the case with TNA as well, though.
Did they do that?
Face heel tunnels as well. Yeah, TNA always did face heel tunnels.
But did they ever tease like a face going down the heel tunnel?
No.
Yeah, so it never got to like that levels of lore.
Lore.
I love lore. I love lore so much.
So Russo's doing this promo with his horrible haircut. At one point, he points out that he paid more for this haircut than people do their trailers, which means he really got ripped off on this haircut.
The amazing, like, the pop we had after, like, a minute or two of talking about Vince Russo's hair for his, like, first line to be about his hair.
It's just hideous. He looks like a different human being with this hair.
Well, to be fair, he also grew out his, like, facial hair a little bit, so he looks a lot better in that aspect. Speaking of new hair choices that were terrible.
So AJ has also dyed his hair to a lighter shade of brown.
It looks like... I don't like it.
Which I realize is a go-to heel move for him, because he did it again in 2010 with Ric Flair. Fair enough, he only did highlights then instead of a lighter shade of brown, but still.
When he went to New Japan, he should have come in as, like, bleach blonde. That's his Bullet Club hair.
So I rewatched this promo earlier today as well, because I usually rewatch promos for shows we did a watch along for, just to make sure I didn't miss anything. This promo was the worst promo in TNA history.
Because it goes for like 20 minutes?
It's so long. It's so long, because I was doing the show notes while watching the promo, and like I had done like a show and a half's worth of show notes, and I was just like, oh, this is still going. He's still talking.
Yeah.
And it is multiple long promos. So Russo comes out and he's cutting like the cheapest heat promo he's ever cut. He feels like he's given up on the idea of his own character.
I don't think he knows what his character is anymore.
But like, yeah, that's the thing. I think he did in like Sex era, where it's like,
yeah,
oh, sports entertainment is good, traditional wrestling is bad. You know, it's very easy to boil down his character to a single sentence then. Now he comes out and he's doing this like, the South sucks, you're all inbred hicks. I'm from New York. That's where real people are from, real civilized folk are from. That's the extent of his promo here. And even AJ's promo was quite similar. And it's like, what is this? Why are you doing this?
Does the Vince Russo character want at this point?
I don't know. To be friends with Jeff Jarrett? Is that still the thing they're doing?
S.E.X era stuff was like to prove this point and to prove that like Jarrett's a hypocrite.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted then. Now he wants AJ to be the standard bearer?
Sure, because he's like, AJ's better than Sting, he's better than Shawn Michaels, he's better than Bret Hart.
Yeah, he's like an AJ stan.
I don't know. Even like Jerry Jarrett makes his on-air debut on this show, where he does a sit-down interview with Mike Tenay. And during that sit-down interview with Mike Tenay, he mentions how like Vince Russo just wants to be Jeff's pal. And he's going through all these things where he thinks if he can just get to a stage where him and Jeff are on good terms again, his life will be good again. And I'm like, I think that's an interesting character arc, but also it's not what Vince is doing anymore.
No, there was a time when that was the plan. Jerry doesn't watch the show anymore. He doesn't have control. He doesn't care.
No, Jerry's just trying to put over the stories that he had when he still had some writing influence like 7 months ago.
Yeah.
You know, when I was writing the show, it was actually a nuanced tale about someone trying to become friends with an old friend because that friend was essential to their well-being. Now, he's just mocking Southern people for, I don't know, reasons.
Yeah. Heat.
Yeah, so Russo does this very long promo where then he introduces AJ Styles, who comes out and does an equally very long, very bad promo. AJ is hideous this month because he does a go-home promo the week before for the world title match where he's like, people didn't think I'd ever be here. People were just like, I'm the cruiserweight guy. And like, hideous, horrific stuff. And like, this is maybe even worse because he's basically doing a worse version of the promo Vince Russo just did. But Vince Russo at least has the charisma to pull it off. Whereas AJ's like, well, you guys have no jobs.
You guys have no jobs. Unlike me, AJ Styles.
Liam does love his Southern accent.
It's so much fun.
And Russo's being like, you're not like these Southern people. You're like a dignified, normal person. I'll take you to New York so you can become a star.
Which I was like, is that like, they're going to the Fed? Is that what that is? Yeah, but like, I'm so used to the shooty pew-pew stuff that I legitimately thought that's what he meant.
This is like the deep text, though, because he wants to get in with AJ so that when WWE inevitably sign AJ, they have to take Russo with them.
Maybe that is the Vince Russo goal.
It would have been very funny if I just literally spilled milk all over myself. Well done, Garrett.
Who spills milk on themselves?
Me, apparently. It would have been very funny if, like, Roman Reigns standing in the ring. Royal Rumble 2016. 3,
I almost
2,
did a spit take because I knew where you were going.
Do I
know that?
Vince Russo.
Bam! Bam! Sex sells! Bam!
Bro!
Bam!
Bro!
Bam!
Bro! Walks out with AJ Styles.
Goes out there with AJ, they both get in the ring, swivels the hips, attacks AJ, Roman gets him, dumps him over the top.
And Vince Russo has joined the Shield.
Oh, he does the fist.
1 sec, let me clean up this milk. Now we finished the bit.
Garrett, stop milking that one.
Listen, I'm not going to cry over spilled milk, so let's...
How dare you?
Don't have a cow, man. Ball's back in your court, buddy.
Kelsey, actually?
So, Styles finishes that promo about how he is a good Southern man instead of the rest of the crowd who are bad Southern people before D'Lo Brown comes out.
You're looking at the real deal now.
This promo is so long. So, D'Lo talks about how Vince Russo made him. That's like, this is what D'Lo sent out to say. That, like, everybody in the WWF thought I was a mid-card nerd, but you, Vince Russo, you believed in me. You gave me, like, the swagger and the head bobble and all the things that made D'Lo Brown D'Lo Brown. And then Vince Russo's like, I didn't give a shit about you.
Again, this is all about Vince. AJ's big I'm the champ. First rivalry. All about Vince.
It's, like, astounding that the babyface comes out here to say that the heel is great and made him everything he is. And then the heel is the guy who's like, nah, I didn't do shit. I don't care about you.
Maybe D'Lo was angling to be in this new Vince Russo group.
Well, the whole thing here is that AJ's like, I was going to let you be my tag team partner against Sting and Jeff Jarrett, but not anymore, D'Lo.
Yeah. They should have been. That match probably would have been better.
So after they talk for, like, legitimately 20 minutes, it's so long. This promo is unbearably long. Like, Raw opening segments are like, geez, guys, tone it back. Eventually, AJ and D'Lo brawl, then Raven comes out to try and get at Russo, but then Shane Douglas comes out to drop Raven.
Like, this Shane Douglas stuff is so weird, because he's just kind of, like, showing up at this point, with no real explanation.
Well, he does explain it in the last show of the month. He is attacking Raven in particular.
2 weeks of him just showing up, like, for no reason.
Just jumping Raven at any given opportunity.
Very confusing at the time, I'm sure.
We are back to toxic Vince Russo trying to pollute the well so that he gets full power.
Well, he did make a cameo on this this month of television.
Yes, he accidentally appeared in the background of a James Mitchell pre-tape.
It was so funny.
He's just hovering there watching.
And then he just jumps out again. It's very funny.
Clearly it was intentional. It's storytelling. It's to tell us he's actually not gone. He's slowly going back.
I wish it were an angle, bro. I wish me popping out in the back of the segment was an angle, bro.
It's not a work. I wish it was a work. That's again. This is the deep story. He wants us to question what's true and untrue, Liam. That's the core.
He probably would take credit for that and be like, "Yeah, man, that was like me planting the seeds."
For my eventual return. Yeah, that's the core of his storytelling, Liam. He doesn't want to let you know what's true or untrue. You live in that weird, unknown world where everything is a work or nothing is a work.
Wow, it feels as if I'm an employee of TNA at the time.
So, Glenn Gilberti, Vince Russo, Raven, and Mike Sanders have their little, like, creative trust. And they're, like, this clique within TNA. And then Jeff Jarrett has his own little clique within TNA. Because, you know, he runs the company. So...
He should have a clique, to be honest.
The way the writing of the show is going at the moment is that Vince Russo writes the show, like, top to bottom. And then Jeff and Jerry, mostly Jeff, edits it. By the end of the month, it's like Jerry's not really in the creative window anymore. It's Jeff and Russo. Russo is always very upset because Jeff edits his work. And he's like, "You're watering down my shit, bro." And he hates it. And he's like getting in Panda Energy's people's ear, being like, "They're ruining it. They're ruining the company. If I just had full creative control, everything would be fine, bro."
Wow, what a great pal this guy is. I'm so glad I brought him into my new burgeoning company where I was gonna, you know, because he's my friend who always treated me well. I'll bring him into my company with my dad that we both made, and we're both gonna love that we made this decision. And he would never betray me by going to the people that bought the company behind my back and trying to screw me out of my creative control.
Like, that's the thing. Like, Jeff, by all accounts, pretty much sided with Russo over his dad. And here is Russo thoroughly making him regret that decision. Like, we've been covering this company for less than a year now. For 10 months. And for the entirety of it, Russo has just been like a toxic, corrosive backstage influence. That if he does not have complete creative control, if his ideas are not totally unfiltered and getting on the air, he throws fits, he politics, he's toxic, he cannot be worked with. And it's like, why would you hire this man? He's clearly just the root of all of the problems in your company, both creatively and politically.
He seems like a very beneficial guy to have in your backstage environment. But, like, also, what does he really bring to the table either? Especially once you take away the whole friendship aspect.
Apparently the biggest conflict between Russo and Jerry Jarrett is that Jerry wants to book Jeff like a badass who doesn't, like, get beaten up that often, and Russo just wants him to lose. So Jerry, Jeff cool guy, Russo, Jeff loses to the Gathering.
Well, there you go. Maybe that's the problem here. Like, you think Jeff would be like, yeah, maybe I should side with my dad who wants to book me strong.
And we talked about it, like Jerry mentioned in his book how he wants to rehab Jeff based on how much he was treated by like a goof in the late days of WCW. And like that's the intent behind the booking. And he's also world champion, so he should be booked strong until he loses. That's traditional pro wrestling booking where your champion looks like a badass until somebody beats him and then that person looks like a bigger badass. But Russo's just like, well, what if he lost to Alexis Lurie and Julio De Niro?
Yeah, I expect the NWA title shots to be happening any day now.
Like, this entire thing played out throughout the entire month as Russo and Russo supporters threw fits. Russo, it's all down to, like, they just edit his stuff, and he cannot handle it. He cannot handle being edited.
But, like, you know, as we've talked about before, this month was pretty good. So maybe if Russo just gets edited, his stuff is pretty good.
But that's always been the thing with Russo. It's always been like, this man's unfiltered creative ideas are terrible. They always have been. The dude cannot handle unfiltered creative control because he indulges his worst instincts and the shows become unbearable. But he does have creative ideas. He does have things he can input. So when it becomes like, all right, we're going to pick your good ideas, Vince, and shove the rest, the absolute shite that doesn't understand wrestling remotely, to the side, the good, thumbs up. You can have good stuff on this show. Because I think this is broadly the best month creatively in TNA history so far.
It's definitely up there. Probably as like a storytelling promotion, yeah. There's probably been better wrestling months, but this is probably the best storytelling month.
And like, there's good wrestling on these shows as well. So it's not like, you know,
one of my favorite matches in company history takes place at this month.
Yeah, so it's not like it's horrible wrestling, but, you know, good angles. It's pretty good wrestling, occasionally great wrestling, and pretty good angles, occasionally great angles. None of it's like, it's not like a home run, this is the best month ever, you know, this is up there with the peak of any promotion. It's not. But in terms of TNA history so far, it's pretty darn good.
You know what the thing is, too? I bet Vince is one of these guys that, like, takes offense to his work being edited, but, like, that's a skill, too. Like, being able to take someone's unfiltered ideas and turn them into a finished, polished product is a skill and isn't something to be offended by. It happens in almost every media industry.
Yeah. It's like, do you think if you write an article for literally any media outlet ever, it's not going to be edited?
I don't know about you, but every time I put a post to Voices of Wrestling, it just goes straight up. There's not a single look over by anyone.
Anytime Rich edits a word, Liam just throws a fit. He's like, bro, You don't understand. You're killing the business.
You understand my vision, bro. I go to Garrett and I start complaining.
Bro, we've got to take over.
I start talking to Andrew Rich behind the scenes, and I'm like, bro, this Rich Craze guy, he's out of line. He doesn't understand my vision, bro.
He cannot work as part of a team. That's what becomes abundantly clear in these first 10 months, that this dude just cannot be part of a group of people doing something. It has to be him.
Maybe that's the key, you know. We've had all this talk in, 2021 about this third major promotion popping up at some point. Maybe we just need full, unfiltered Vince Russo.
That's what the wrestling world needs. I see it in my Twitter. There's a dude called, is it Chris Lomas or Lonas, who is always in my Twitter mentions and has been for like 3 years. He just pops up being like, this is nothing like the Russo days. It's like, dude, just quit wrestling.
Yeah, fuck it, let's do it. I solemnly swear that if Vince Russo opens a pro wrestling promotion in the next year, I will cover every episode of it.
Yes, it's called NXT 2.0.
Oh shit! What if he actually was?
Listen, looking at the tenor of the program, I wouldn't be entirely shocked if that was a Vince Russo joint. It has many of his trademarks.
All right, let's go. I mean, sure, why not, huh?
This is at the very least written in the inspired by Vince Russo category.
Yes, it is Vince Russo adjacent at the very least.
Let's start with the world title scene, in which we were continuing the where last month left off, building to a world title match between the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and the phenomenal AJ Styles.
And honestly, a match that I'm glad happened just for historical value.
Yeah, it's one of those cool TNA things where it's just like you're going through the TNA history, like looking at the matches that happen on these shows, and you're like, oh shit, an AJ Styles Dusty Rhodes world title match?
Yeah, like, never watch it, but just be glad that it happened.
So NWA TNA pay-per-view number 64 is built around AJ Styles and Vince Russo facing Jeff Jarrett and Dusty Rhodes in the main event. That's October 1st, 2003. There's a show-running angle where Russo doesn't want the match to happen, so he's like talking to Jeff Jarrett. He's trying to talk Jeff Jarrett out of doing the match. He's trying to make his one final plea to his friend Jeff Jarrett after this year.
I was gonna say, this was a big return to, like, the sexual chemistry of these two performers. Every time they're together, you just kiss.
But Jeff keeps turning him down, Liam.
I know, that's why they're star-crossed lovers. It'll never happen. And it's their own prejudices that are stopping them from experiencing true love. Bringing it back. It's a sad story. You just wish they could get on the same page.
Sure do. So...
Imagine a heel stable that Jeff and Russo are both in.
No, I don't want to.
That's the dream.
I don't even want to think about it. I don't even want to have that
Jeff
thought
Gilberti Russo.
No. I guess Siaki would have to be there because he's in all of their stables, just hanging around.
Yeah, but like barely a part of it.
Trinity's there too, I guess.
Sure.
So yeah, we had the show running angle on October 1st where Russo told AJ, this match isn't going to happen. I'm gonna make amends with Jarrett finally. And then he tries to make amends with Jarrett, and Jarrett's like, just go fuck yourself.
Jarrett's like, no. What the fuck?
We have literally been at each other's throats for a full calendar year now. So, no.
I like that Russo was like, he was confident that this would be the time it would work.
Yeah.
He's like, I believe that we can get this done. Like, we've done all this stuff, but this is the time I can get through to him.
But he did not. He failed.
It's a shame.
Which brings us to our main event of that show. Jeff Jarrett and Dusty Rhodes faced Vince Russo and AJ Styles.
Listen, I know I wrote notes. I did not write any notes for this match.
Dusty did a brainbuster in this match, Liam.
Yeah, not intentionally.
He still did a brainbuster.
That's fair. That is fair.
He very much did take AJ up for a delayed vertical suplex and then brought him down into a brainbuster kind of by accident, but he still did a brainbuster.
To me, the match was kind of nothing. The Styles got his ass slapped again. That was fun.
Yeah, like the story of the match is like continuing to build tension between Jarrett and Dusty. So Jarrett hits the top rope stroke, Dusty spanks AJ's butt and pins him, and they're all happy. Jarrett's not mad that he stole the pin. But then after the match, AJ's like all flustered and mad, and he's like, "I'll give you any match you want. Do you want a Texas bullwhip match?
A Texas
a Texas pig eating contest?"
I do want that, by the way.
It's very fun. I love that promo just because AJ very clearly couldn't think of anything Texas related.
Like, so much of this show is written. Did they not write Styles promos for him?
So he's like trying to improvise some kind of Texas related stipulation, but he cannot think of any. So he like blusters and flusters and mumbles for a little bit and then comes out with like a bullwhip match and a pig eating match.
Well, lucky he doesn't say anything else. Knowing AJ's history with getting flustered and shouting things.
He did not shout any slurs. That's good.
This is kind of evident of like the whole story this whole month, which is like AJ and Russo splitting up and Jarrett and Dusty splitting up, both at the same time. Because afterwards, we get I thought it was the thing that saved that AJ promo was when he slapped the taste out of Russo's mouth.
Yeah, because he's offering Dusty any match he wants, and Russo's like, no, don't do it, because the same thing happened the last show last month, where AJ's like, I want to face Dusty, and Russo talked him out of it. He talked him down that time.
Talked him into the tag match.
Yeah, so this time Russo's like, oh, he's trying to talk him down again, but AJ's like, no, I'm my own man, you don't tell me what to do, and he slaps Vince Russo, and Russo...
I like this, like, little bit of an unhinged AJ here. I thought it was really good.
All you have to do, Liam, is spank his bottom, and he will go mental.
I'm sure that is true.
Give AJ a little spanky poo, maybe with horsey poo. Add horsey poo, spank his bottom with horsey poo.
He would not have got the points for that, though, because he would not have liked it.
No, he would have lost points in the Dup Cup. He would have not enjoyed horsey poo. So yeah, AJ's all flustered and fired up, saying, Dusty, you can have any match you want. And Dusty's like, any match you say? Oh, I could have a Texas Bull Rope match. I could have a Bunkhouse Brawl. Or, perhaps, I could have an NWA World Heavyweight title match.
Yeah, it's a good shout there. It's like, you offered me any match. Yeah, all right, I'll take a title match.
So Styles is like, you're on, let's do it. And then Jeff Jarrett is pissed because earlier in this show it was announced that Jeff Jarrett would face AJ Styles for the world title on the October 22nd pay-per-view. So Jarrett has his title shot and he is not pleased, Liam, that Dusty Rhodes is jumping the line and getting a title shot before him.
I'd be pretty pleased. And like, either Dusty's gonna like weaken up AJ or I'm gonna fight Dusty.
And would you think you'd have a better chance against Dusty, Liam?
I think I would have a better chance against Dusty, yes.
Over AJ Styles?
Andrew probably fuck me up.
You could probably just smack AJ's bottom and then he'll lose his cool and then you could beat him.
Oh, I would love to have, like, just stand and throw hands with Dusty Rhodes in my life. Even if I got the shit, like fucking kicked out of me at the same time, I would have been like, yeah, let's go. I'm into this.
That would be very much one you would do just to have the story.
Yeah, I'd be smiling the whole time.
Just getting your ass kicked by the American Dream, baby. As he's cutting a promo on you as he's kicking your ass.
Oh, that's the dream. I don't care. Like, he can hit me with, like, shoot punches and then hit a worked elbow and I'll still bump.
So that sets up AJ Styles against the American Dream Dusty Rhodes for NWA TNA pay-per-view number 65, October 8th. Jeff Jarrett opens that show coming out and he talks about how Dusty is selfish. Dusty's out for himself. Dusty is jumping the line. He's a typical icon, just like Savage and Hogan and Piper and all these people who he name drops multiple times this month, I think, just to get Hogan's name in there in a way that seems moderately organic as opposed to just mentioning Hogan for no reason whatsoever. And Dusty comes out and he stands on the ramp and he's like, no, you can't talk. I'm not letting you respond to me. I have things to say.
I love this, actually. And every time Dusty would go to say something, he'd cut him off with it. And it was so good. And then Dusty just, like, didn't even get a word in and, like, Jarrett leaves. And Dusty just looks, like, despondent from it.
Yeah, he's like, well, I'm not even going to say anything because the segment just ends. Like, as you mentioned, Jarrett's like, the best thing I can do tonight is leave the building. So, and I will face, whether it's you or AJ that walks out of that match, I'll see you on October 22nd, but I'm out of here. And yeah, Dusty just kind of stands there kind of flabbergasted. He's shell-shocked.
This is a good angle. Just an interesting note from me watching this show. Interesting choice to seemingly have Jarrett and Styles double turn ahead of their title match. Oh, Liam, of a week ago, you hardly knew.
I wonder why they suddenly put that into movement.
But yeah, I really liked this segment. I thought this segment was really good. It's funny, there's a lot of cool segments on these shows, but the wrestling just really let it down.
So Tenay has a sit-down interview with Dusty where they talk about his history with the NWA title and how that title means so much to him. And it's just your standard Dusty Rhodes promo where he's like, oh, this is the history and tradition is so important to me. And it works every time because he's Dusty Rhodes.
I could listen to Dusty talk about the territories all day.
He's like the opposite of Piper in that even when Dusty talks about nothing, he's interesting, whereas Piper always talks about nothing and he's not interesting at all.
But you know what it is? He adds like this gravitas to history, and it makes you feel like how important it was. It's really brilliant. If there was a podcast back in the day where Dusty and Rob Naylor were just talking about territories, I tell you what, I would have slapped down. I would have paid the Patreon money for that.
Because, yeah, Dusty's talking about how important it was to him that he won the belt that Jack Briscoe or Luthez had, and how that established him in wrestling. And now this, he maybe has one more last run in him. Maybe AJ's taking him a little lightly. And I do love how he turns it around on Jerrett. It's like, if the positions were reversed last week and I had the world title match on October 22nd and Jerrett had a chance to take a title match on the 8th, he'd take it every day of the week. And he's like, yes, you're right, he would.
And I like how in this promo he's like, maybe I am a little selfish. Maybe I am a little cocky. He's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm allowed to be, bitch. I'm Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, he's like, I'm the American dream. I can do whatever the hell I want.
And it's like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. You can.
You are the American dream. There was a slightly more unfortunate show running angle through this one, which was Vince Russo.
Listen, I thought it was good.
So Russo is not there at the start of the show. Styles is worried. He's there backstage with Siaki, Trinity, and ECMO, and they can't get in touch with Russo. And Trinity's like, oh no, he's going to come, it's fine. And then later in the show, right before the world title match, a drunk Vince Russo arrives.
Yeah. And a drunk Vince Russo arrives looking exactly like me.
Oh, that's how you look all the time?
Just hair everywhere, beanie half on, jacket half on. Just straight up Liam fit right here.
He's like, hey Jay, don't you worry, bro. Everything's gonna be. He's Rick from Rick and Morty.
No, he's Morty from Rick and Morty.
He's both. He's Rick and Morty combined into one.
Yeah, Rick Vince Russo talking to Morty AJ Styles about wrestling Dusty Rhodes.
So yeah, he shows up drunk, and he's at ringside drunk for the world title match between the phenomenal AJ Styles and the American Dream Dusty Rhodes for the NWA World Title, in which Styles retains after Dusty Rhodes passed out in the figure 4 and AJ beat him by pinfall.
Dusty bleeds like a maniac in this. It looks like he's been shot in the goddamn eye at one point.
This like the crowds are pretty dead for all of October. Like for a crowd that was actually pretty hot for a few months there, they completely lose interest in TNA this month. And this is the match where I'm most sad like the crowd weren't into it. Like, cause like a big match where Dusty's in the world title match and the crowd are living and dying on Dusty. And I think there's two things that maybe distract from them being invested in Dusty, and that is...
Well, there's one big thing that distracts them.
The first is the fact that Jarrett is getting the title match October 22nd, so most people probably don't think Dusty is winning.
Yeah, I think going into this, not many people thought Dusty had a chance here. But, like, I guess that's what the opening segment at the start of the show was meant to be. It was like, if it is Dusty Jarrett, like, at least there'll be something to it.
And then the other thing, of course, is Vince Russo playing drunk at ringside, just taking all of the steam away from the match. It's all about Vinny Roo.
I remember being so worried that Vince Russo was going to ruin this by making it all about him.
He did.
They kept like cutting back to Russo, like very early on in the match, and I'm just like, stop it! I'm trying to watch Dusty Rhodes and AJ Styles.
It actually made me mad that like you have Dusty Rhodes against AJ Styles, like. I think calling it a dream match is probably a step too far because of this isn't Dusty in his prime. But it's like a really cool intergenerational match. And you decide to make this whole goddamn match between one of the best up-and-coming wrestlers in wrestling in 2003 against one of the most iconic wrestlers in the history of wrestling. You decide to make the whole thing about drunk Vince Russo. Like, they're the only person who can make that choice is Vince Russo. I can't imagine, like, everybody in that building, everyone else in this company is like, yes, this is what this match should be about. It should be about Vince Russo spiraling out of control instead of a really cool intergenerational world title match as two generations collide, and we have this cool moment for Dusty challenging for the NWA title. And like, Dusty comes out in his fair enough, he did it the week before as well, but it's cooler here for the title match, where he comes out in his trunks and the boots, and he's in his old school wrestling gear, and he looks like the Dusty Rhodes of old, and he actually shows up for this match, and they make it about Vince goddamn Russo.
There was a very funny moment to me in this match where they were brawling out on the outside, and Dusty like laid AJ out and then just sat down for a straight minute. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, take a fucking breath, son.
Because he's already bleeding at that stage, and they're brawling into the crowd, and he's just like, I'm just gonna chill out here for a minute.
You know what this had the energy of? Vince Russo showing up drunk to his son's recital. He's like, you got this, man. I'm so happy for you. But like, to go back to the earlier points about the booking and stuff, it's like, do you really think Dutch Mantell was like, you know what, we gotta get this Dusty Rhodes AJ Styles match and make it all about Vince Russo?
No, I don't think he would have. Do you think Jarrett or D'Amore or... Like, the only person making this about Vince Russo could possibly come from is Vince Russo.
Glenn Gilberti.
Disco and Vince Russo.
Yeah. There was one drunk Russo spot in here that I really liked. And it was a really great spot where Russo goes to help Styles leverage the figure 4, but falls down like a drunk asshole. So AJ just does it himself and wins without Russo's help.
Yeah.
I like AJ still won as a heel, but he did it with his own heel shit and didn't rely on his dad.
Yeah, Dusty did get a visual submission over AJ in the figure 4, but the ref was distracted.
Yeah, all in all, I didn't hate this match, but I didn't love it either.
I did like Mike Tenay and Don West were very good. I did enjoy Mike Tenay explaining the history of Dusty's figure 4 and how that these are the big matches he's won with the figure 4, and this is why this is a big move, and he's locked it in, and he's gonna beat AJ with the move. It really does help when you have somebody like Tenay who legitimately knows wrestling history. He doesn't have to fake it. He doesn't have to recite a Wikipedia page like I think you see a lot of announcers do. It's like, oh, I read these facts off Wikipedia. Whereas like Mike Tenay lives pro wrestling history. So when he gets somebody like Dusty in there in this kind of match, he can really add to the call with adding the historical context of Dusty challenging for this belt and the moves he uses. And I think that's really neat. Many wrestlers miss Vince Russo because he had a knack for making everyone from the top to the bottom of the card feel like $1 million. Even those who think he was a fatally flawed booker agree that he was better for morale than the current booking structure. Jarrett and Mantell have a policy of making wrestlers feel totally expendable as a way to get their asking price down. The belief seems to be that only a few wrestlers currently being used actually make a difference in the buy rates, and with a tight budget and weekly losses of $10,000, that leaves everyone else without bargaining power.
Sure.
Here's the thing. If you're the booker and you believe only a few wrestlers make a difference to buy rates, that's your fault.
You know who has the power to change that?
You know who has the power to turn Chris Sabin into somebody who could potentially make a difference for buy rates, or has the power to turn AJ Styles or D'Lo Brown or America's Most Wanted or all the...
Listen, and just a crazy idea here. A CM Punk. You got a bunch of guys here that you could give a shot to.
Now, Julio Tenero's the real star of the gathering.
Honestly, I'd try both at this point. Why not?
Sure, this is the month they do turn them, so they're doing what you want.
Yeah, we'll see how it works out.
Like, if only a few people are contributing to buy rates, maybe you should try and make the people you have bigger stars, huh?
Yeah.
Ugh.
I feel like that was kind of like always a recurring issue where it's like, instead of trying to make our guys the draw, it was, let's look for the next draw we can bring in and see what happens. And it's like, no, just try the guys that you have. Put effort and power and money behind them.
And then what will actually happen is you'll get cases like Christian being like, I want to go there, work with AJ and work with Joe and work with all these young, exciting, fresh wrestlers, instead of being like, I'm going to get Vader to come in to pop a buy rate and he won't put anybody over, and it'll be for like the net negative of the company, even if he does do a good number on one night.
And like, I feel like we have this discussion all the time now where it's like, they're just getting the WWE guys, but it's like, there's a difference between getting WWE guys just because you're desperate for anything and picking and choosing legitimate talent that will make a difference.
TNA having Orlando Jordan like big league Christopher Daniels before Christopher Daniels goes on to lose to Val Venus is what drove fans away from TNA.
Yeah, it's like Jeff Hardy, obvious. Kurt Angle, obvious. The Team 3D, obvious. But there's a level of like, and like even if they're young enough and they weren't stars, that's all you can give them a shot too. Because why not? But it's when you're desperate and you're like, I need mid-carter 3B from SmackDown.
It's like, let's get the Bashams on the show. It's like, why? Who knows?
And then they can beat AJ on TV in 8 minutes.
Well, Shannon Moore show up and start punking out AJ, because why not?
Yeah, that's when it's... I mean, this is, this is territory we will cover consistently, I'm sure.
One story making the rounds is that Vince Russo has told Panda officials that he will not return to the creative process as long as Jeff Jarrett is involved. Russo has been telling people that Jarrett never bothered to call him when he made the decision to remove him from the creative team to pave the way for Hulk Hogan coming in. Russo claims that he was given the news by Jerry Jarrett and that Jeff never returned his calls when he attempted to talk to him about the situation. Russo is still on the company payroll and is said to be very frustrated with his latest fall from power.
What do you feel about this?
The shows are worse without him, but also when he gets full power, the shows are quite bad. So, I don't know.
But they're still better?
Well, they become funny bad instead of boring bad, which I'll always take funny bad over boring bad.
Boring is like the worst thing entertainment can be. I will take bad over boring.
Yeah, because like the Russo shows are at least silly, and you can laugh at them, as opposed to some of the shows. Not really this month. I think this month is fine. It was the 2 months before that were particularly like lifeless. There is some stuff this month that like is pretty good, and at least there's like exciting directions they're moving in, as opposed to November and October, which were, I think, there's just like dire months across the board where nothing was happening and nobody was over.
I will agree that this is a better month than the last couple months. I'm still not high on the company at this point.
Yeah, no one is. not even TNA.
It's not an enjoyable experience to watch these shows. Which like it has been. I feel like there's a misconception that like this is what it was like all the time at this point.
Despite discontent with the product lately, Dixie Carter is sticking by Jeff Jarrett as the head of creative. Jeff Jarrett has only minority ownership in the company. Different percentage figures have been circulated over the last year, but Carter would apparently have the power to oust him as head of creative. However, she promised Jarrett that she would stick with him no matter what, through thick and thin, until 2009. Says one wrestler, though, I don't know any talent that produces themselves better than somebody else could produce them. There's no way not to lose perspective when you book yourself.
No wrong.
Dutch Mantell is more vulnerable than Jarrett. Dutch's situation is giving the boss what he wants, says one TNA wrestler who's familiar with Dutch's booking over the years. Says another, Dutch is obviously focused primarily on pleasing Jeff Jarrett, since the majority of his booking ideas are centered around getting Jarrett over. Everything else has been an afterthought and nobody is happy about it.
He's the Bruce Pritchard.
Like, you do see it on these shows that they have increasingly become the Jeff Jarrett show. Like, these shows are just all about Jeff and Jeff creating a stable. Because we, for the first time, well, not really the first time, S.E.X was the first one, where that was the first, like, all-encompassing angle where all the angles in the show were secretly about sex. Sentences. Whereas, like, November and December, increasingly, especially in December, all of these shows are about Jeff Jarrett. All of these shows are about Jeff Jarrett's group that he's forming and his trying to get power in TNA and his feud with Eric Watts. So, yeah, it really is the Jeff Jarrett show these days.
Yeah, we're living on Planet Jarrett, baby.
Not yet, but yes.
In spirit. I can't blame Dutch. Like, this is what he was brought in to do, basically. At least if it... Yeah, well, I mean, I can blame him for putting on a show that I don't enjoy watching, but as far as, like, he's doing what he is told to do.
He is making the part owner of the company seem like a big star. But he's not even doing that, though. Like, Jarrett doesn't seem like a big star. It's just that he's all over the show. He's annoying. And not the good kind of annoying. He's the, I want to skip your segments kind of annoying.
Do you think that is more on Jarrett's ability to deliver in these segments than it is the actual segments themselves? Like, if it was a better performer being put in these situations, it would work?
Like, I'm not a fan of all-encompassing angles, just as a general rule. Angles that, like, just pervade every element of the show, because then you're all or nothing. If the angle is bad, the show is bad.
So you can't have like a little pocket of the show that's good because it has to be about this big all-encompassing angle. So I as a general rule, I don't like what they're doing at the moment. I don't like the periods of TNA history where it's just like, and now everything on the show is about Immortal. And it's Immortal all through the show, and you can't avoid Immortal. So even if there's someone or something you like on the show, that's also about Immortal, so it sucks. So I don't like that as a general concept. I think Jeff is a good performer. I think he's a good wrestler and he's a good heel. So now that he's being booked as the top heel, where literally everything's about him, and he's just unbearable, I think it's just overexposure and bad writing.
I agree also because we've seen that he can work as well. Like, not like in the ring sense, in like being a top heel can work as well, because we've had it before and it felt better.
Yeah, because his first run was as a heel a year ago, and that was fine. And then even like the little babyface run he had as champion, I thought was okay. He was pretty good. Yeah. There was like rough patches with the disco stuff, but for the most part, I thought he was a good babyface champion. And now that he's just overbearing, all over the show top heel, I'm already sick of him now, and I know we're getting this for another 3 years. So,
Garrett, are you ready to apologize to Vince Russo?
I might actually have to apologize to
Yeah, you might actually have to apologize to Vince Russo. We might actually both have to take an L here and apologize to Vince Russo.
Or at least bury Dutch Mantel. Vince Russo has not been backstage in several weeks, and the office has told some wrestlers that he is no longer writing the shows. At this point, the wrestlers are under the impression that Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel are responsible for the writing, while Jimmy Hart, Glenn Gilberti, and Scott D'Amore contribute their ideas. Russo continues to get mentioned on TV, so it seems like they're setting the stage for a possible return as at least an on-air character in the future.
These shows were better when Vince Russo was in charge.
Or, well, when he was contributing ideas, because we hit that sweet spot, Liam. We hit that sweet spot in June, July, August.
Where he was reined in, but still contributing.
Yeah, whereas the Russo and Gilberti write it, D'Amore throws in some ideas, and Jarrett edits. And that did seem like, the sweet spot for good ideas on the show, a hot show, good angles, and the show was actually good. And then they did take Russo out, they scaled D'Amore back as well, and then they added Dutch. So...
Sorry, Vince Russo, I guess. We blamed you for a lot of things. Some of it deserved. I think we can admit to that. But we do have to say, since your power has been completely stripped, as far as we know, the shows have, in fact, been pretty boring.
Yeah, a follow-up on this. Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel have now been writing TNA shows for a few weeks. The weekly creative meetings are held Thursday morning in Nashville and attended by Jarrett, Mantel, Jimmy Hart, Glenn Gilberti, Scott D'Amore, and Dixie Carter. Jarrett still has final say on all booking matters, and Mantel is clearly second in creative power. Gilberti, who used to write the shows along with Vince Russo, is still involved, but only as a contributor. D'Amore also contributes his ideas, but he's not nearly as involved in the process as he was when Russo and Gilberti were writing the shows. Russo is said to be unhappy about his demotion from the writing crew, but keeps in regular contact with Panda's Dixie Carter. The general consensus is that Russo is being retained by TNA as Carter's fallback plan.
And will be for the next decade.
But there are some who say Jarrett asked for Russo to remain on the payroll due to their friendship. The excuse Russo was given for being sent home is that Hulk Hogan wouldn't work with the company if he was involved in the creative process. Russo has been telling friends he believes Jarrett would have him sent home anyway because they butted heads creatively quite often over the last 6 months or so. This is like, it takes a while to get Russo out of this company, every time. Or it's like he's been ostracized now, he doesn't have creative power, but he still hangs around the company for another year and is an on-air character for a large portion of that still. So we'll still have to put up with that for a while. But this is the slow phasing out of Vince Russo. Like, this has to happen so that we get good TNA in 2004, 2005. But yeah, it's a tough transition at the moment.
I'm still waiting for these mythical good shows. There was definitely a time where we talked and you're like, oh, it gets good. And it feels like I've been hearing it gets good for literally 2 years at this point.
Hey, it got good during the summer. You had a little taste.
And listen. It got good, but it was still like, a 6 out of 10. Like,
no, it was like a 7, occasionally an 8.
I'm not running to show people these shows here, okay?
You got like Triple X against AMW. You got like that really good Jarrett Raven title match. You got the Hoovy and Saban stuff. You had everything Dusty Rhodes. You had all the Raven and Shane Douglas stuff. There was a bunch of really good stuff during the summer.
I don't know, man. I don't think it was enough to like forgive the negatives.
You're just a negative Nelly. You just want to run off to your Ring of Honor.
I do a little bit.
Listen, you will suffer through, and we'll eventually get to good TNA. Okay? Okay?
I'm sure we should put that in the fucking intro.
It's only going to take about another year of programming, but we'll get there.
And then, like, the thing we don't even talk about here is, like, oh, we'll get there, sure. But then I'll be like, all right, cool, that was a nice 18 months in this 10-year journey where it was good. This better be the best 18 months in wrestling history.
But, that, like, 7 to 09 is funny bad, though, so that's good.
I can handle that at least.
You're getting very negative on the show, Liam.
Getting?
Yeah, I need a more positive attitude from you about TNA, please.
Sorry, I'm representing the casual fan here.
No, don't you get me started.
I don't understand it. Okay, I get told it's good, but then I tune in. I don't understand.
Yeah, and you said this month was good. Well, you didn't, but still.
No, I didn't. I said this month was better than the worst month in TNA history.
So Vince Russo visited the TNA offices last week, and there is talk that a reconciliation between him and Jeff Jarrett is in the works. With Hulk Hogan apparently out of the picture, the door is open for Russo to return in some capacity. There is still some tension between Russo and Jarrett over the way Russo was sent home due to the Hogan negotiations.
There is still some tension between Russo and Jarrett over all the knives in each other's backs.
But the two sides are talking again at the very least. Since he was sent home, Russo has been very outspoken when talking to friends about the creative direction of the company. Most TNA insiders are saying that Russo was also very critical of TNA's direction during his meeting, while others are downplaying those rumors by saying that while there was tension, the meeting was cordial. All sources say Russo was very open to the idea of returning to the company and most expect him to return in the near future. How that would impact Dutch Mantel's position isn't clear.
Poorly, I imagine.
So Vince Russo was backstage at last Wednesday's NWA TNA pay-per-view, January 21st. For the first time in months, he attended the pre-show meetings and produced backstage segments. In other words, he was back. So he's basically back on creative, back to producing, and apparently instrumental in the return of Jerry Lynn.
I guess, yeah, because Jerry Lynn didn't really like the new management.
Because like he's been gone for, I think he said 7 months on the show, and I'm like, has it really been that long since we've seen Jerry Lynn?
Was it?
I think it was like July, August was the last time, so it hasn't been quite that long. But yeah, it's been a while since Jerry Lynn was on the show.
Jerry Lynn also had problems with Hulk Hogan and was like, Hogan's coming in. We have to get Jerry Lynn and Russo out of here.
You see, when Hulk Hogan looks at Jerry Lynn, he sees a full head of blonde hair. Instead of just the back half of blonde hair and a bald head. So Jerry Lynn is basically a threat to what he thinks his hair should be, and he hates looking at him.
You put the idea in my head of a clip of Hulk Hogan, like, where the camera is just slowly zooming into his eyes as the distorted version of Real American plays, and the character just begins to shake violently, and an image of Jerry Lynn's hair transposed appearing over the image of Hogan.
He wants to do a hair versus hair match against Lynn, where he can then steal the hair and tape it onto his own head.
Yeah, it's hair versus hair, as in they have to swap hair.
Poor Jerry.
That's why he's got to win.
So Russo's back.
Yay. I'm happy about it. I'm legitimately happy about it. The shows were better while Russo was here.
And they were better toward the end of the month when he was back, so listen.
I'm going to make a staunch claim, Garrett. This is I, Liam of January 2004, saying, I think we've seen the worst that Vince Russo has to offer, and that it can only go up from here.
Again, I will give Vince Russo credit in that when the show is predominantly his creative direction, when we do get to the end of 2006, 2007, it's very bad, but it is infinitely more watchable than TNA was at the end of 2003.
Vince Russo does not have the worst creative period of TNA history.
Probably not, because to be fair, actually no, he does. I think he does. I think the first half of 2014 is worse than 2013.
I forgot about that. Yeah, because that was the era that, like, killed my fandom, so we'll find out. We'll revisit that later on, but as far as, like, the eras that he gets the most flack for, I feel, like, not even the worst stuff in those eras.
I think that, like, that first half of 2014 combines the boredom of the end of 2003 with the nonsense of Vince Russo, so you just get the worst of all aspects.
It's been a long, long time since I've seen it, so...
And it will be a long, long time before you have to see it again, to be fair.
True.
Because Mike Tenay comes out on the ramp after the match and reveals that there has been a new director of authority hired by the National Wrestling Alliance Board before they were disbanded. And that person is none other than Vince Russo.
It, of course, starts off with that classic gigantic beep.
Yep. If you watch the Impact Plus version, you'll just hear beep, beep, which is him shouting, fuck you, as the opening of his theme song.
Which is, like, again, very funny that Chris Harris got yelled at.
Poor guy. And again, Harris was in this match. He was probably still like lying ringside when this happened.
Yeah.
Should have tried to strangle Jeff right there.
But yeah, I liked this segment actually.
Vince Russo is back. He's a babyface.
Yeah, let's see how that goes.
Doesn't start very well.
It seemed like he came back as a babyface and then immediately was no longer a babyface, but...
Well, like, the whole idea is that you're supposed to be questioning whether or not he's a babyface, whether or not he is true to his word, that he is a changed man, he's now a decent fellow, so that when he does things like, we'll talk about the next show, when he books Chris Harris in a series of matches, you're meant to be like, maybe it's the old Vince Russo, but then he reveals, no, there's actually a master plan all along.
I just questioned the booking more than anything.
Just Vince Russo as a babyface, I'm thoroughly not sure.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
So NWA TNA Baby number 83 opens with Mike Tenay's back. Are You Ready is gone. It's been replaced by the theme song that was there for the first show of the month. Or first show of the year even, going all the way back to January.
I miss Are You Ready?
Oh, your Randy Savage theme is gone.
Ready? It's a good theme.
I like that the second Bound for Glory was off the table and they didn't want to court Randy Savage anymore. It's like, get rid of his song.
They probably had to pay a fair chunk for it.
I wonder, like, was that like quid pro quo? No. Gone. Was that a backroom deal in exchange for exposure?
Yes, a quid pro quo.
That's the word. I'm just descending into madness and losing the ability to speak.
And the worst part is now, Garrett, we've hit the second hour of recording. Sorry, the third hour. So now I'm going to start to deteriorate real hard too.
So all the changes have been made. Mike Tenay is back. JB is back. Don Callis is now a consultant. He's been banned from the Asylum. And the TNA dancer cages are empty.
But... You know, I was distraught for a moment, but later on in the show, we find out that Lollipop has found other employment. Getting perved on. Again.
I like that they didn't remove the cages. They're just empty.
That would take too much effort.
They had like a solemn shot of it when they mentioned it. It's like, oh, and you know, Vince Russo has gotten rid of the TNA dancers because he's cleaning up TNA. And then they just cut to like a solemn, sad shot of an empty cage.
I remember it being like pretty sad. It was weird.
Yeah.
I guess it's weird because we've had them for so long. It doesn't feel like it's time for them to go.
We're moving into a new era of Vince Russo's TNA, Liam.
Hopefully we can change the stage up a little bit now that we're removing the caged women.
So Mike Tenay comes to the ring and he's like, I was stunned when Vince Russo was made DOA, but then he talked to me and he said he's cleaned up his act. He wants to turn TNA around. He wants to put a check on Jeff Jarrett's abuse of power. So I believed him. So then he introduces Russo.
Yes. A fresh cut.
Yeah, and different music this week. He no longer has the fuck you theme.
They thought that might have been a little much for a babyface.
For a dude whose entire thing is that he's a changed man and now he's a good guy.
Yeah.
So Russo talks about how when he was last seen on TV in October, he got the shit kicked out of him by Jeff Jarrett, and his wife questioned, how did it come to this? And then he had his come to Jesus moment, literally, as he says he deserved his ass kicking because he prayed at the altar of television ratings at the expense of his soul. He talks about all the raunchy things he did, and he mentions that he did all like the vulgarity and the nudity and the swearing, and the crowd are like, woo!
Yeah. Okay, so I like Russo as a performer generally, but I really didn't like this, especially since he's trying to be a babyface here, because the whole thing was just him jerking himself off, saying, you know, I'm so good, I did get the ratings, and I did get the success, and I made all the money, and it was all great, and everyone loved it, and then he's like trying to be a humble babyface while bragging the entire time.
Yeah.
Well, this is going to be a sentence. I didn't get a shred of genuine emotion from Vince Russo here, which made this a very difficult promo to connect with. Maybe that was intentional because he's trying to play this middle line thing. I just thought it was kind of bad.
The thing is, like, this is after, or during, I think, while he was finding God. And by all accounts, this was not just the television character, this was the man himself. There was talk about how he was a changed man, he wouldn't swear anymore, he'd be a good person. And it's just made him a boring television character.
I don't even think it was a boring television character, I just didn't think it made any sense.
And everyone was, like, there's a moment where he's like, oh, I'm a changed man, and literally the crowd starts chanting bullshit at him.
Yeah, which is like, that should be the shtick, right? Is that he's actually just himself all along and he's pretending.
But no.
I don't know, man. This segment did not connect with me at all.
So he talks about how he's going to start asking for forgiveness from people around him, which brings out Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett, naturally, doesn't believe Vince Russo. He thinks he's full of shit.
Which is, again, exactly what the crowd thinks as well.
So Jeff Jarrett's just a baby face here?
Yeah.
Also, Jarrett's like, hey, you want to join me? After all of that, he's just like, if you want to join me, you can just say it.
Yeah, if you want.
We spent like 18 months feuding about the whole idea that I don't want to join you. But listen, now I'm the bad guy doing evil things. You want to join me?
Yeah, come on, let's go.
So Russo said, no, it's time to pass the torch to the young guys and give an opportunity to new people. And Jarrett's like, fuck that.
I love how, like, fundamentally opposed to that he was.
He's like, did you see me in WCW? I'm not doing that. This is my time.
Which kind of rocks, actually.
It's like, I founded this company to get this chance. I'm not giving it to fucking AJ.
It's pretty good, to be fair.
He's a good character. So Jarrett gets in Russo's face. He pushes him over. Russo gets back up. Russo doesn't retaliate. He slaps Russo real goddamn hard.
Good.
He sunk that slap in. But again, Russo doesn't rise to Jarrett's provocation. He doesn't retaliate. He turns the other cheek, if you will.
But the thing about that is, like, that doesn't make you a babyface in wrestling.
No, it makes you a bit of a bitch.
Yeah, it's like, that in real life, right, that's like the bigger thing to do. But this is a whole genre of television about fighting people.
Yeah. There's even like a note from Dave Meltzer about the Teddy Hart CM Punk fight, where it's like, Teddy Hart could have gotten in trouble for rising to Punk and participating in the fight, but he probably would have been seen as a bitch if he backed away. So, people were like, he couldn't have backed away. Because that's pro wrestling.
Yeah, you see it like in MMA and stuff too, is like if someone starts something, you expect the other person to jump back. Just because it's a sport built around punching each other in the face.
So the whole idea that Russo will not fight back against Jarrett does just make him seem even lamer of a character.
It just doesn't connect. Which I guess is the whole problem with this Russo thing in general at the moment.
Vince Russo is slowly but surely working his way back into the booking crew. Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel are still in charge of the shows, but Russo has been submitting a number of ideas. Some wrestlers believe the last 2 episodes have had Russo's fingerprints all over them.
Ooh. You mean the good episodes?
Even some wrestlers who were against the idea of Russo booking the company 6 months ago are now behind the idea of bringing him back if it means Jarrett and Mantel won't be writing the shows.
Well, I think we've always said, to be fair to Russo, that good ideas, man, that just needs to be reined in. Ooh, and an alarm.
Yeah.
That is the we are praising Vince Russo alarm. That is a staple of the podcast. It goes off every time we talk pleasurably about one Vincent Russo.
It's just like, you sure? You sure you want to talk positively about Vince Russo?
But yeah, we've said that from the start, right? It's like he needs someone to rein him in and control him. He can't be the head guy.
Yeah, we've all said he's a great guy in the room, and he's great for filling out undercards with stories, but he is not the guy you want determining your overall direction because he gives in to his worst impulses and he hates pro wrestling. So he will derail everything you do if he is the guy, but he will contribute good ideas if he is a guy. Problem being, he is physically incapable as a human being of being a guy rather than the guy, and will slowly over time sabotage you.
Yeah, he's on that grind set.
Glenn Gilberti and Scott DeVore have been removed from the booking team in recent weeks. The main creative team members these days are Jeff Jarrett, Dutch Mantel, and Vince Russo. Bob Ryder and JB also sit in on meetings from time to time. Although some sources believe Russo is writing the shows again, they do not believe he has that much power. Jarrett has final say on all booking matters, and still seems to defer more to Mantel than Russo. Though apparently the structure is back to the Russo writes the show and then Jarrett and Mantel change it. So it is like Russo's base that Jarrett and Mantel are tweaking again.
Again, I don't think that's necessarily bad.
They're like, bad idea, bad idea, good idea, bad idea, good, bad. This is what we're doing.
I think also now having the restriction of working towards television is going to be a benefit there too, because it's like there's a lot of things that we got away with on pay-per-view that we can't necessarily get away with doing TV.
Yeah, and that is like a direct edict from Fox Sports Net that they want any blood, they don't want any sex, they don't want any excessive violence, they don't want any swearing, they don't want any like risque stuff.
What they're saying is we would like a wrestling show, please.
Yeah, so they just go back to produce a professional wrestling show that's clean and easy to put on television without fearing we'll get kicked off TV.
Management believes with the new schedule of 3 live and 1 pre-taped show per month, the company can save money on production yet still do solid buy rates if the pre-taped America's X Cup matches create enough of a buzz. Although most wrestlers say they understand that the company is simply trying to save money, some are upset over missing out on the 4th payday. Contractually, TNA wrestlers are only guaranteed 26 dates per year, so management is well within their legal rights.
They should go work for Ring.
They should go supplement their deals with other... Oh no. The funny thing here is that while yes, they are cutting back on the number of shows they do per month early in the year, they dramatically ramp it up starting from June, where they record live the pay-per-view on Wednesdays and then tape Impact on Thursdays every week. So they go
I know it.
They go from taping 3 times a month to taping 8 times a month all of a sudden. Liam is so excited for that period from June to September where we will have 4 impacts and 4 pay-per-views to cover per episode of this show.
TNAchad.com.
On the bright side, when we get through that, it's only 4 impacts per month. It actually becomes dramatically less.
That is the dream. That's what. Once we get to the regular schedule, it'll be nice. Gotta earn it though.
You gotta suffer through 10 hours of pay-per-views in a month.
Jesus Christ.
TNA is shifting away from the NWA initials since they don't own the rights to the name. When dealing with growth in general and a national network in particular, they need to assure partners in marketing the product that they have full rights to the name and all associated revenues. TNA has been preparing for this transition for many months, as the website URL TNAWrestling.com has linked to the same website as NWATNA.com. Since the last year, all references to NWA have been dropped other than a small logo on the website and the names of the titles, which gives the titles, in theory, a sense of history and prestige. The new Proc Sports program is called TNA Impact. It's not clear yet whether the NWA initials will be completely eliminated, but without question, TNA Wrestling is the main name of the promotion now. So yeah, they're phasing out the NWA. They will still have the NWA titles, but it will no longer be NWA TNA. It will no longer be like the NWA freaking board of directors appointing an NWA director of authority. None of that stuff. It's just TNA.
I'm surprised they didn't go straight for their own titles.
I kind of get like the history and prestige of the NWA title. It does add a little more oomph when your title is just like held by Killing Styles, Jarrett, and Shamrock, which is the only people it's been held by for 2 years.
I just meant like with TV. I'm surprised they didn't like do a complete switch.
Yeah, I guess if they're ever going to do it, this is probably the time to do it, right?
Yeah, like you could have just made it the King of the Mountain match for the TNA title. Which would have been so appropriate if the first TNA Championship match was a King of the Mountain match.
Won by Jeff Jarrett.
Oh, perfect.
But yeah, they wait another 3 years to get rid of the titles.
Silly.
Vince Russo issued a statement on the internet to announce that he is going to ministry school in Colorado. He was telling friends backstage that he plans to continue working for TNA, although no one seems sure whether his school schedule will force him to give up his current on-air role.
Me about this show.
You're going to ministry school?
No, my school schedule will force him to give up his current on-air role. I'll still be behind the scenes.
Just be me monologuing?
I'll find someone that you can replace me with.
It'll have to be just a charming, witty Australian person.
God damn, I'm the only one.
There's never been another.
I'll get Hugh Jackman on the pod.
In that letter he wrote on the website, he expressed his frustration with wrestling, saying he was in deep depression from WCW, and until 6 months ago, TNA was no different, saying it's every man for himself, dog eat dog, and total paranoia and politics. To which I say, Vince,
I wonder who made that environment!
Do the exact same thing I said about Jeff earlier, that's your own fault. Vince, fuck you, that's your own fault!
Whatever, man.
This man cannot be helped.
Oh, Vinny Roo.
He's the worst as well. I hate him. We'll talk about it when we get to the shows, but I'm fucking sick of this Vince Russo character.
He's too skinny too. I don't like skinny Vince Russo.
It's like skinny Walter.
Yeah, well, skinny Walter's cursed. Skinny Vince Russo's just... I think it's, it emphasizes the terrible character somehow.
Yeah, I'll save my rant about the character until we talk about the shows. So that brings us to the world title stuff for the month.
Great.
Yeah, the whole story here is that Vince Russo is just God. He is God-man ruling over all of these minions, but he is constantly conflicted and sad and torn and making like strained faces, and he's so just wrought with the decision making.
He sucks.
I fucking hate him. I hate him. I hate him more than I've ever hated a Vince Russo character. I tweeted this yesterday. I think this babyface Vince Russo authority figure is the worst character in company history. He's just the worst.
Ooh.
Because like I got a couple of replies to that being like, Triton is funny. You'll get to Triton in 2005. Triton's funny. You'll get like Claire Lynch. Claire Lynch is also pretty funny. Like, she's funny bad. This Vince Russo character, he's just unbearable.
And one thing I think those people don't get either is those things are bit parts of the show. Mm-hmm. This is 80% of the show.
Everything that happens on the show has to go through Vinny Roo.
Which has never, like, not been the case, but it's extra grating now.
Yeah, because at least we always acknowledged when, like, the whole show was revolved around sex, that Vince Russo, while he was an overbearing character, and while the story wasn't particularly good, his delivery was always excellent. Like, he was always, like, a well-delivered, well-performed character. We always gave Vince Russo that credit. Whereas here,
for sure,
we just see this just mopey git that I cannot tolerate. He's making this face every time he walks out, where it looks like the weight of the world is on his shoulders because he has to decide whether AJ Styles is facing Chris Harris or Raven this week. And like, never has this decision been more difficult. He can't just say a name. And like, we had the whole show running thing on the Road to the Cage, which was probably the peak of the worst of it. But it's just his character every week that he's just this git who stands there looking sad all the time.
He looks like a cartoon turtle.
He does. He's just lost. A lost cartoon turtle.
I don't know, Vince. This hasn't been good. He's just kind of annoying more than anything.
Every time he appears on screen, he's just annoying.
And like, he's trying to be a babyface, but the crowd doesn't like him either.
And nobody on the show likes him. And the whole idea is that nobody trusts him, and everyone thinks he's actually a scheming jerk. But he's like, no, I'm a good guy.
He's not compelling at all, in any way.
No.
You just want his segments to be over once they begin.
Ideally not there in the first place.
Well.
But other than Russo, the whole story this month is that AJ Styles is defending the NWA title basically every week. He defended against Ron Killings last show of April. He won the belt the show before that against Jerrett, so he's in a title match every single week. This week, the first show of the month, NWA TNA pay-per-view number 93, he's defending the belt against Raven.
Yeah, I liked the Raven match.
I didn't, so I'll start with you.
I just thought this match was, like, it's just nice to have two stars go out there and wrestle, and I enjoyed Raven kind of working over the limbs. This is the only limb Raven match that I've enjoyed so far. I didn't like the chair stuff that much. Like, anything that involved the, like, cheating wasn't my cup of tea, but I liked the actual in-ring work.
I think that overbooking has, like, reached a critical mass this month in particular. Where it's just like, you can't just have AJ Styles babyface having a title defense against Raven. Particularly, like, the most egregious one is, like, you can't just have him having a title defense against Chris Harris. There always has to be bullshit. There's just so much bullshit. And the bullshit usually results in Vince Russo having to make sad faces about how much bullshit there is. And he can't possibly come up with a solution to get rid of all the bullshit. And he gets all sad about it. It's really annoying.
They're paying off all the bullshit with the King of the Mountain match, though, so...
Get to that in a sec. But yeah, I'm not into this Raven heel run at all. I'm just not into him as a character. I'm not into him as a wrestler, which is very disappointing because, as we've stated many times, we enjoyed Raven a lot in this show so far.
Yeah. He was the wrestler of the year last year.
Yeah, he rocked. Every week we'd come on and be like, oh, Raven's thing this month was the best thing that happened this month.
Oh, the show sucked, but Raven was good.
Whereas now, like, the show is boring and Raven is boring.
He's been dragged down to the level of the rest of the show.
With a needless heel turn. That's all it is. They turn him heel. They should never have turned him heel.
Honestly, the best thing this month was the Abyss Eric Watts stuff.
We'll get to that. You and your Eric Watts agenda.
I'm not even joking. This is completely unbiased. This is just an objective truth. The best stuff this month was the Abyss Eric Watts stuff.
Alright, we'll get to that when we finish the world title stuff.
Can we just skip it?
No. So earlier in this show, Scott Hudson was talking to Armando Quintero and La Parka.
Yeah. The La Parka. Massive star. Observer Hall of Fame candidate? I don't think he was. I think he was voted in, was he?
The reason La Parka is here is because this is held on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. So they have La Parka there, except it's not La Parka.
A notable name for US television too at this point, WCW and such.
So La Parka's doing a promo and speaking in very broken sounding Spanish before Raven attacked him.
Yeah. It was so rude too. He's like, thank you for being here. Bah!
Yeah, it's like, hey La Parka, it's nice to see you. Brr, 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 brr.
And I was, you know what I was like, damn, we're getting a cool Raven La Parka feud.
That would have been better than what it turned out to be.
I was into it. I really wanted it.
So yeah, the main event, you had that Styles and Raven match. Raven pulled out a container of powder. Raven dropped it. AJ threw it in his eyes while also simultaneously eating a super kick. Raven then dropped holded the ref into a chair because he was blinded. Raven hit AJ with a chair, but there was no ref. Then out comes La Parka.
I was like, yes. Also, LA Park was inducted in 2018.
Good for him. So La Parka drops Raven with a DDT. Styles hits the Styles Clash to retain. Then La Parka reveals himself. He unmasks Liam. Turns out, every time you've seen La Parka, it's been Chris Harris all along.
Yeah. And the other La Parka was, of course, Bobby Roode.
They actually say who it is here. It was played by Harry Del Rios, aka Spellbinder, according to Wrestling Observer.
Raven is not a Wrestling Observer Hall of Famer, by the way.
And I don't think he ever will be.
I don't think he's going to make much of a case at this point in his life.
He did just show up against all odds. You never know. You remember WCW also did this angle where I think it was DDP unmasked himself as La Parka?
Yeah. He's one of those guys that they use for that sort of spot. AEW needs to continue the tradition.
Who's the AEW La Parka?
It's got to be like someone involved in this Roosh Raven feud, right? Raven. Roosh Andrade feud.
No, it's how MJF should return.
Ooh, I like that a lot, actually.
You should have La Parka strut out, hit somebody with a chair, unmask, it's MJF.
That'd be great.
So yeah, La Parka is actually Chris Harris. AMW beat up Raven. The entire locker room comes out. Russo's here. Russo says Harris is exactly like Raven, but then Harris says, "Shut up, I want to face AJ." And AJ's like, "Yeah, sure." And Russo's like, "Oh, I don't want that match to happen." And then they all brawl to go off the air.
Would the King of the Mountain match be better if La Parka was in it?
Yes. Who would you take out for La Parka though?
Listen, I know he's the world champion. I'll take out Jeff.
Yeah, get Jarrett out of here. Mostly so he can't win.
And then La Parka can win the belt. That's the way to come to TV.
So that brings us to our next show, NWA TNA Pay-Per-View number 94, May 12th, 2004, in which the main event, Chris Harris finally gets the title shot he earned months ago against AJ Styles.
And he finally proves everyone right by winning the...
Oh no, Liam, it says here he lost?
That seems very silly. Well, you know, it makes sense. Maybe they want AJ to go on a big run heading into TV.
Oh no, Liam, AJ loses the belt next week.
Wait, what? That's okay. Maybe, he'll win it back on the first Impact or something.
Oh yeah, that's what's going to happen in June. That's, yes.
Oh no. Your inflection on your voice makes me feel like he's not going to beat Ron Killings for the title on the first Impact show.
So it's funny, there's a pre-match promo before this where Styles is like, "You're a good tag team wrestler, but can you cut it as a heavyweight wrestler?" It's like, AJ, they just did that with you.
Yeah, that's the point.
He's a babyface. He shouldn't be a hypocrite.
He's a dickhead.
He's not. He's a babyface.
Also, I don't know who said that promo right then. That doesn't sound anything like AJ Styles.
You're a tag team. Whoa. They had a match. I thought the match was frequently pretty good when there was no bullshit.
Yeah. So it's two good wrestlers who are dynamic and can do some crazy shit.
Yeah, so Vince Russo came up with the wonderful idea. So there's been outside interference in all of these matches.
I'm leaning back because it's great. Oh, I have a mic that can move now. I can actually do this.
So Vince Russo has this miraculous idea that instead of just simply banning people from ringside, as perhaps a normal, rational person might do, Vince Russo has concocted a master plan where he will have Raven and Ron Killings handcuffed to the turnbuckles, to the posts,
where they could never get involved, right next to the ring.
Right next to the ring, within reach of the ring and the ropes and the top rope, where they could not possibly interfere in the match.
And the wrestlers!
This is Vince Russo's master plan. Raven interferes immediately.
Yeah, Vince Russo's a fucking idiot.
Then Conan runs out, cuts Ron Killings free with bolt cutters.
Which actually rules.
It took him ages too. He was like, "Ner, ner, 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 ner," and it wouldn't break. It was good stuff.
We've also been having a ton of 3LK stuff in the lead up to this.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the lead up to the match next week. Because it's more Vince Russo stuff and I hate it. So Truth then interferes on AJ for a while before Don Harris comes out and he boots Conan and Killings. Harris hits the catatonic, but then Raven pulls the referee out. Raven then grabs the key from the referee, unlocks his cuffs. He hits Harris with a chair. He was about to do the chair arm thing he did to Harris, where he stomps on his arm while his arm is lying on the chair. He did that a few weeks ago. But then Sabu comes out. If you remember, Raven has a contentious relationship with Sabu now because Raven basically abandoned his tag team partner. Sabu makes the save. Kid Cash runs out, hits Harris with a pipe, which Styles follows with a discus lariat to retain. Then Raven hits Styles with a chair, but then Harris spears Raven, but then Killings drops Harris. All the locker room comes out. Russo books a 4-way between the 4 for next week for the title.
I mean, it was chaotic, but I liked where it ended up.
Yeah, like there was like a 5-minute stretch here where AJ and Harris just had a match and it was really good and there was some great near falls and the crowd like honestly bid on like an elbow drop. For some reason the crowd really likes that Chris Harris elbow drop. They always think it's a finish.
It's a good elbow. You can just thank Macho Man for that, I guess.
But yeah, I thought the match was good when it was good and the rest was the rest.
Yeah, that's fair. You can say that about literally every match on this month, but...
Alright, NWA TNA pay-per-view number 95, May 19th. Vince Russo has a new plan. He has banned a specific list of people from ringside.
Couldn't possibly just ban everyone.
He has banned James Storm, Kid Cash, Dallas, 3 Live Crew, and Sabu from ringside in our deadly draw 4-way main event in which Ron Killings, Chris Harris, AJ Styles, and Raven face for the NWA title. So those specific people cannot interfere. Perhaps somebody else can.
That's insane.
This is Vinny Rue. He's incompetent.
No, I mean, like, that would never happen.
Nobody would ever interfere with an NWA World Title match. It's just the stakes are too high. It was too credible.
Yeah, everyone has too much respect for the title.
You would never undermine the credibility of the championship.
Especially heading to television.
So as you mentioned, we had this Ron Killing story running through the month. This 3LK feud with Vince Russo, where they basically feel like Vince Russo is slighting Ron in favor of his boy AJ.
And the weird thing about all this is like, the way it's presented is that they're all being heels, but the crowd still loves Ron Killings and wants him to be champion, and so none of it comes off well.
Well, you see, I think they're meant to be baby faces. It's just they're not particularly likable.
I don't think they are meant to be baby faces. They're being like objective dickheads.
They're definitely meant to be. Like, they're booked against heels. They're meant to be baby faces. It's just they don't understand what makes people likable. So here we are.
But like, they're fighting Vince Russo, who is also a babyface.
But is he? That's the whole thing. Is he?
I hate it all. It hurts my brain. Why can't this just be Jurassic World domination?
It doesn't make your brain hurt.
It's too nuanced.
It's too artful. So yeah, there's a segment at the start of the month of 3LK demands a title shot. Russo's like, no, you don't get one. Then Monty comes out, demands a title shot. He's like, no, nobody gets a title shot. Then they brawl. So Monty is feuding with 3LK as well, with the idea that 3LK think Monty is Russo's guy trying to take them out, I think.
Monty's like barely around.
Yeah, so then Russo kicks 3LK out of the building. But then we find that Vince Russo's office has been trashed later that night, Liam.
Did we ever find out who did that?
Not yet. I'm not sure do we ever, but we haven't found out yet.
Do we know who actually does it? Do you know?
I don't remember, no.
What if it was Jerry Jarrett?
Yeah, he's like, that's what caused his heart attack. He's like, he got too wound
On the way
up.
out, he was just kicking shit over. He's like, fuck you. If I'm going out, so is your office.
So the next show of the month, Monty Brown faced BG James.
What a funny match.
It wasn't a terrible match.
No, it wasn't bad. It's just like you see Monty Brown versus BG James on your screen and you're like, what am I watching?
So they brawl all the way out into the crowd.
Like every Monty Brown match at the moment.
Yes, like every TNA match, you need to walk and brawl in the crowd. And they set up a table underneath the balcony and Monty Brown teases throwing BG off it. And I'm like, never in a million years is BG James taking a balcony bump through a table.
No, and he doesn't.
There is no tease in wrestling history that I have believed less than this tease of throwing BG James off a balcony.
Listen, I have to watch Don Fuji threatening to throw someone off the Cork and Hole balcony like twice a month. And I still believe that more than I believe BG James taking this bump.
BG is never taking any bump.
He doesn't like to do wrestling, so like, why would I believe this?
Yeah, and in fact, not only does he not take the bump, he in fact ends up powerbombing Monty through that table. So
BJ always wins.
Monty crotches BG on the rail and then starts hitting his leg with a chair a few times. Then Monty hits a pounce and wins. The idea Monty has attacked his knee and perhaps taken out BG James.
I'm just remembering the promo that BG cut later when he's on the ground.
Yeah.
And he's like, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't go that low.
Because later in the show, he's backstage. Hudson has 3LK and BG, and like Ron's mad, and Conan is like, Russo did it, and yeah, BG's like, no, he wouldn't do that. He's my friend. He wouldn't do that.
He's like, and he moves so sharply like a robot, just like, no, he wouldn't do that. No.
Also, in TNA canon, hasn't Vince Russo fired BG from S.E.X before?
Yeah, but that was just a firing, not an attempt at taking out his fucking leg. That's a gentle firing.
So, I know TNA officials are said to be very high on Monty Brown, which explains his recent winning streak. Dutch Mantell is said to be the office worker most soundly behind Brown, although he's not alone in the office when it comes to the opinion that Brown is a future main eventer. Brown is well liked in most locker room circles, although a number of wrestlers think he is too green for the push he's receiving.
Wrestlers.
They're just jealous. They look at him and he's like, he's too cool and he has too much charisma. We have to take him down.
Yeah.
So all that BG bullshit, all that Conan bullshit, all that Russo bullshit brings us to the main event of the May 19th show, in which Ron Killings defeats Chris Harris, AJ Styles, and Raven in a deadly draw match to become the new NWA World Champion.
It was alright.
We have, once again, for reasons beyond comprehension, made an NWA World title change all about Vince Russo.
I mean, are you surprised?
There's like a bunch of notes this month, which I didn't include because I do not believe them. That's like, oh, Russo doesn't have that much booking power these days. It's like, fuck you, watch the television show.
Yeah, like, no one else likes him. Like, in the booking office, so...
It's literally a show about an unlikable character who puts himself all over television. He clearly has some power.
But also, like, it's not like he has people on his side anymore. He stabbed Jerrett in the back a million times. Jerry doesn't like him. Dutch Mantell isn't his guy.
He's just a man on an island, trying to become a minister.
So, I don't know. It seems like there's one person with booking power who would be putting him out there every second of the fucking show.
Making his big mopey face.
I hate him.
So the structure of this match is a new TNA stipulation. They called it the Deadly Draw. So 2 men started. It's basically a little gauntlet gimmick.
Call it the Deadly Dander.
Deadly Dander should have won the Deadly Draw. Ooh. So 2 men start. They do a 5-minute interval. Then Raven came out. It was Harrison Styles that started. Then 5-minute interval. Then Killings came out. And then whoever scored the fall won. So it was a little staggered entry 4-way, basically.
I would have preferred pin eliminations, but I guess then we have to pin 3 of our biggest stars.
As opposed to just pinning AJ.
You know, normally the rules of a 4-way are done in a way in which you don't have to pin the champion.
No. AJ, because they already pinned Harris and Raven this month. They couldn't possibly pin them again.
But they're all in fuck finishes that don't matter.
It's all fuck finishes that don't matter.
Speaking of...
So if you remember, Russo had his list of people that were banned from ringside, but not included on that list was Jeff Jarrett.
Which seems like a huge oversight.
He really didn't think that one through, because Jeff has been laying low. He's been gone this month. This is, Russo thought he'd just finally draw him out.
You should always assume that Jeff Jarrett's around, though.
Hovering somewhere with a guitar ready to hit somebody.
That is his modus operandi.
You should recut the opening of the Batman. It's like, in the shadows I'm waiting, and they were scared of the shadows, except it's Jeff Jarrett in the shadows wearing his like cowboy hat black getup thing with his guitar ready to hit anybody.
Something in the way.
And it's just, Jeff Jarrett is the Batman, except he has a guitar.
Jeff Jarrett is the bad man.
He's the guitar man.
The guitar man.
So Jarrett comes out, he hits Styles with a guitar, which is like a shoot guitar shot. That Styles' blade job is not a blade job. He was busted open by that guitar.
Cool.
Harris had Styles beaten, but then Killings pulled the referee out. Raven clotheslined both himself and Harris over the ropes. Killings hits a top rope axe kick on Styles.
Which looks awesome.
Yeah, great finish. To become NWA champion for a second time. But then, we couldn't just have a celebratory moment. Couldn't just be like, oh, the Truth has won the belt again. Everyone's very happy that the Truth has won the belt again. Nah, has to be about Vinny Roo. Vinny Roo comes out, he grabs the title, he looks all mad, he's making his face again.
Am I gonna allow this?
The story can't be that Ron Killings earned the NWA title. It has to be Vince Russo allows him to be NWA champion.
I don't care for this Vince Russo guy. I mean, hot take, but I think this guy sucks. And I don't want him on my fucking television. And more importantly, actually, I'd argue, I don't want him booking the fucking television.
Just keep him away from professional wrestling in general, I would say.
Yeah, keep him on some dopey podcast
that nobody has to listen to.
Yeah, only huge losers do them anyway.
Nobody does podcasts.
In 2022?
This isn't a podcast, this is a higher form of art. This is an audio experience. Sorry, this is a conversation series.
This is a conversation with our best friends.
Yes. Hello, best friends. How are you doing?
Now with the best friend.
So yeah, Russo decides that the decision will stand and that Ron Killings is the new NWA World Champion.
Great. Glad we needed that 3 minutes.
Ron Killings didn't find out until the day of the show that he was winning the NWA title. He was said to be frustrated when wrestlers warned him that his title reign would likely be a short one, since everybody expects Jeff Jarrett to win the title either before the show debuts or FSN shortly thereafter.
I'm sad.
And they're right. He has a 2-week title reign.
Hey, spoilers.
I won't even pretend to have jeopardy that Jarrett wins the belt back in King of the Mountain.
Well, you know, he is King of the Mountain, so...
Yeah, and AJ Styles was upset with Jeff Jarrett because the cut he received from Jarrett's guitar, although Styles calmed down quickly. Wrestlers point out that Jarrett has a history of being reckless with guitar and chair shots. One incident that wrestlers recalled was when Jarrett split D'Lo open with a chair on a TNA pay-per-view.
I'm sorry that brother wants to lay it in. I am the Jeff Jarrett defender.
He's just the shooter. He just wants to make it convincing. He's a good wrestler.
As we know, good wrestling is when you actually hurt the person.
When you bust them open. It was a pretty sick blade job as well. He was bleeding a lot.
I feel like we shouldn't say blade job.
Yeah, wrong word. Shoot blood.
Hard way.
Shoot blood, baby.
That's an extra half star right there.
It is the rule of professional wrestling. It is the law. Jeff Jarrett held several talent meetings with various groups of wrestlers prior to the pay-per-view last Wednesday. This is like the third week of the month, to inform them of the company switch from weekly pay-per-views to monthly events. There was a bit of a lag there because it got out in the media before they actually informed talent, which is never ideal. Tell your talent things, for the love of God. But
evergreen statement.
I know. And many wrestlers are understandably concerned because they will be losing 3 dates per month and maybe 2 more if the company decides to tape Impact on a bi-weekly basis. Then again, not all of them were working every Impact taping, and it wasn't long ago that there were only 4 dates a month. Like, this current setup has only been since June, so the good days didn't last in terms of the paydays they were getting from TNA.
Yeah. Listen. I mean, I don't know, I'm into it. Like, I want to know, like, how many of the wrestlers thought this was actually going to be good for the product, though.
I'd imagine most of them are the exact same as us, sitting here being like, these shows are stretched too thin, there is not enough content for 8 shows a month, and it's just resulting in some of the most boring, nothing happening TV you'll see in a long old while. And I think a lot of them would be like, it's probably better off if we're running less shows and building to one destination point.
And they also mentioned how, like, they prefer the Impact shows in general.
Because, well, part of it is because the crowds are hotter, which may not be the case this month. But
yeah,
because that crowd has been given nothing for 2 months. So, of course, they're like, all right, I'll just sit here and watch my freaking Jeff Hardy squash match where he does nothing and hits a swanton. We have a Dixie quote here, Liam, if you'd like to read it.
Oh, hell yeah! In 2 short years, TNA has leveraged successful Wednesday night weekly pay-per-views to take the company from a virtually unknown entity to the most recognized new wrestling alternative for fans around the world.
Says Dixie Carter, president of TNA Entertainment.
As we continue to grow the company across all platforms and take advantage and respond to the ever-changing cable and satellite marketplace, we strongly believe the move to a monthly pay-per-view event format will be another positive step in establishing ourselves as a serious contender in our industry.
Carter added.
This change in business strategy has been very well received by our pay-per-view partners. Please follow me on Twitter.
So like there's not much there. It's the classics like, oh, the industry is changing and we're changing with it, even though this weekly pay-per-view format never worked and would never work.
I think it's also like it's big corporate speak of like we're doing something which could be perceived as bad, but we're gonna frame it as like this great decision that everyone's gonna love.
Yeah, that's the best natural next step for the company because the first 2 years were so successful and now this is going to become more successful. This is what the 2 years were building toward, of course. Not that the monthly pay-per-view model never really worked. It never got off the ground. They only had a few real hits in the era and now they're trying to move to something else.
But, you know, good! For the 20th time that I can say it.
Speaking of random things that probably got misinterpreted, at the August 18th show, the word backstage was spreading that TNA might indeed be launching a 2-hour primetime show to help promote their monthly pay-per-views beginning in November. During the pre-show locker room meeting, Jerry Lynn stood up and asked whether Jeff Jarrett is considering adding a second hour to Impact, given they're getting rid of the 2-hour show. And Jarrett said, "I'm way ahead of you."
I'm way ahead of you, Jerry. Jerry, I'm way ahead of you, Jerry.
One quote wrestler quoted Jarrett as saying, which feels like a thing he said to like, again, positive spin things, and then it got out, I was like, oh, they're thinking about it another hour to Impact.
I think it's his way of saying, shut the fuck up, Jerry. He's like, I don't even want to do this goddamn meeting.
So yeah, there you go. We'll talk about this more next month, of course, because that's when the actual Asylum shows come to an end. So we'll do a bit of a retrospective on the Asylum era. Not that there's anything we haven't said already at this stage.
Can't wait to say some real positive bullshit about it.
But September 8th will be the final Asylum show. And of course, this will be the September will be the last episode we cover month by month. So as you've noticed, the format of this podcast has been we'll do a month. We're talking about August this month. Whereas starting from the October/November episode, we'll be talking about pay-per-view by pay-per-view. So that October-November episode will build up to Victory Road. December episode will build up to Turning Point. January episode will build up as far as Final Resolution. So on, so forth.
You've definitely told me this before, but I definitely did not remember that we were doing that. And I was like, oh shit, let's go.
I said that to you like 3 different times, but...
Yeah, I don't remember. That was like 4 years ago when we started this.
It just makes a lot more sense to cover instead of doing half a pay-per-view build, a pay-per-view, and half a pay-per-view build. We'll just do the pay-per-view builds. That makes it's a lot cleaner.
Yeah, sure.
Vince Russo is no longer an active member on the TNA creative team and hasn't been for some time now.
And apparently that's a negative.
Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel are handling the bulk of booking duties, although Jerry Jarrett is a regular voice in his son's ear. Russo is still with the company as a talent and produces backstage vignettes, but he is no longer involved in the creative writing process.
I hate to give Vince Russo any credit, but, you know, these shows have sucked. But also, I want to do the Fortnite L on the head dance at every Vince Russo foible. So, fuck you, but I miss you. Like, I'm glad things are looking down for you, but I do wish you were in charge. I'm happy for your lack of success, but I also wish that you had success.
Listen, there is the middle ground where he chips in and has some nice ideas, and the show gets more interesting.
They should just have Russo and Cornette 50-50 booking the show.
Where it's just them. It's like they come out of a room after 3 days, like battered, bruised, bloody, but they have a television format.
And it's the best show you've ever seen.
I'd say, like, if you could really get those two to hammer it out, like put them in a room and be like, write a television show, and you like they were willing to do that and willing to do like the full rounds with each other, they'd probably produce a pretty good TV show.
Again, I would use every grey matter and fiber of my being to make this a reality. They should do that in 2022. They should combine their gimmicks of hating modern wrestling and form it into a new company where they work together.
That would be a twist. With Jeff Jarrett.
That would, like, randomly garner some interest, too. You know that people would be like, alright, I gotta watch the Vince Russo, Jim Cornette promotion. Freddie Prinze Jr. should bring them both in.
The creative team's answer to anyone who has asked why there are so many squash matches on Impact is that they feel it's best to get over the characters. Russo wrote to the Wrestling Observer because Dave is constantly skeptical that Russo is actually gone. Every week he's like,
when you said that, I thought you said Roosh. And I was like, holy shit. Roosh wrote into the Wrestling Observer about NWA TNA?
Yeah, he's giving his review. He's like, I love that Psychosis guy.
I'm gonna fuck up that LA Park guy in a few years.
Vince Russo sent us a letter, the Us Being Wrestling Observer, saying he's been off creative for the past 3-4 weeks. The company had portrayed him as being off creative for much longer. He said until that time, he used to go back to Tennessee after the Florida tapings and stay with Jarrett and Dutch on Fridays, but hasn't done it in a while. He asked Jarrett to take him off creative. He said it's true, he did do the D'Lo Brown bit a few weeks ago.
Wow, Garrett. Your favourite segment of the year was a Vince Russo joint.
To be fair, it was meant to set up a heel turn. You know that those vignettes you've been seeing, Eric, that have like that boo music with a dude appearing?
There's no fucking way that's D'Lo.
That's a heel D'Lo.
Fuck you. There's no way. That's like show. That's like show Tanaka.
That never goes anywhere, but yeah, those vignettes have been airing. We haven't mentioned them, but they're weird. Like he's in a blue room wearing this fancy gear with like dance music.
I assumed it was some European for sure.
Nah, that was meant to be D'Lo.
That's so funny.
But the crux of this message to Dave is that his heart's not in it anymore. He just doesn't care.
He lost his smile.
Well, no, he's trying to become a minister, so he doesn't give a shit about wrestling.
Lie that you won't go. No more yesterdays.
And if you watch him on the show, you see he doesn't care. You see it. You see it in the man's eyes, and also his mopey facial expressions.
That's the character. The thing about it is, they now have like an on-screen replacement for him too. Like, just write him off, send him home.
Well, that's ultimately what they're doing. That's where the Dusty and Russo stuff goes. It's toward the demise of Vinny Roo.
Oh, Dusty could be the spice. Let Dusty book.
Oh, what a good idea. Maybe Dixie will do that.
See, I knew it. I put it out there, and you fucking just out of park, you know.
Out of LA Park. We'll start with everyone's favorite storyline, Vince Russo and Dusty Rhodes, which is undeniably the main event program in this company at the moment.
Yeah.
So if you remember, there's a whole bunch of drama because Dusty gave Jeff Hardy a title shot, and Vince Russo's not happy that Dusty gave Jeff Hardy a title shot, even though Jeff Hardy earned his title shot by beating Monty Brown.
And because, like, Vince said, do whatever it takes to get that contract signed. And he offered him a very reasonable thing of a title match.
Which is, in TNA precedent, D'Lo Brown was offered the same deal, if you remember, Liam.
Yeah, Vincent.
D'Lo came in with a promised NWA title match, so there is precedent for this. But so the entire month is Vince Russo and Dusty being mad at each other.
And doing the same segment.
Over and over again. So NWA TNA pay-per-view number 106, August 4th. It opens with Scott Hudson meeting Dusty Rhodes outside as he arrives. And Dusty's like, I smoothed things over with Vince Russo, daddy. And I'm going to be named to the championship committee today, daddy. Because Vince Russo's naming his new championship committee. David Young walks by being like, Vince Russo fired me, I'm sad. And Dusty's like, whatever.
Dusty's like, I don't care. I got a job for life, daddy.
So then later in the show, Russo's announcing his brand new championship committee. And it's a lot like when Russo was announcing that AJ Styles would face Jeff Jarrett. You had Raven sitting backstage looking at the monitor, super excited at that time. This time it's Dusty backstage looking at the monitor, being super excited. He's like, he's going to announce me on the championship committee.
He's hanging out with AMW. They're just boys hanging out, ready for the announcement.
Mm-hmm. Russo's doing his freaking same old. It's like, I'm a changed man. I have inner peace. I'm doing the right thing. I'm not going anywhere. Crowd boos. So he names his championship committee, which is Larry Zbyszko, Harley Race, and Dusty's like, it's going to be me. And then he names Terry Funk as the third man, who is actually never seen in TNA. He's on the championship committee. He's never seen.
That's fine. I hope they were paying him just to use his name.
Dusty's real mad. He comes out. He's like, I delivered Jeff Hardy to you. Why are you still mad at me? And Russo's like, you shouldn't have given him a title shot. Even though, again, he earned the title shot. He beat Monty Brown. He earned the title shot.
Well, he got the title shot before that. Like, he was promised the title shot, and then he had to defend the title shot against Monty.
Yeah, but he still earned it.
Yeah, like, it was... Vince is mad on principle, not on what happened.
So they're talking forever. So, of course, what happens when two people have been talking forever? Jeff Jarrett appears. Mm-hmm. Jarrett's like, look at you, Dusty, you're on the outside looking in. This is very funny because Jarrett's trying to look into the eyes of Dusty while cutting this promo, but Dusty is pacing back and forth up and down the ring doing a giant strut, and you can tell Jarrett's a little frustrated because he has to like match Dusty stride for stride to continue to look in his eyes. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, Jarrett just looked pissed off in this promo entirely. Like, Dusty would cut him off, and he's like, shut up, man, let me speak.
So Dusty starts strutting, Jarrett tries to cut his promo, they get into it, Hardy runs out. Dusty goes to hit Jarrett with a guitar, Monty pounces him, Truth comes out to make the save as Truth and Hardy stand tall.
Woohoo.
There's going to be so many more of these segments. A little Jeff Hardy note. Jeff Hardy surprised several co-workers by showing up early for both the pay-per-view and Impact tapings. And also, by all accounts, he's not only fitting in with TNA wrestlers now, but he's telling people he's really enjoying participating in the wrestling business again, and that TNA management is giving him more incentive to build around him. Whereas early shows, there was concerns about his commitment.
He's hanging out with Kaz. He's like, Kaz is the coolest. I love being here.
The current 2022 X Division champion is a good influence. NWA TNA Baby number 107. We open with a 3 live crew match against Team Canada, where Team Canada won with a hockey stick, but then Dusty came out, told the referee what happened, who restarted the match. Conan rolled through in a crossbody, giving them the win to make them number one contenders of the tag titles, by the way. We'll talk about that in the tag section. Russo, though, was once again mad that Dusty has involved himself in the decision-making process, even though he has no authority here.
Which I was also mad about. I was like, what the fuck, man? You have no authority here. How come you get to make this decision? And you did it to make the 3 Live Crew win? Fuck you.
That is the biggest travesty here, making 3 Live Crew number one contenders of the tag titles.
Instead of a cool Divine and Young match?
So later in that show, Mike Tenay makes the official announcement that the September 8th will be the date with Faith, as Jeff Jarrett and Jeff Hardy will face for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. That's the new big match they're building to. It's the same format as Jarrett Raven, where they announced the match pretty much 6 weeks in advance. For this one, 5 weeks. So they're building to the big September 8th Jarrett and Hardy match.
Cool. I mean, it's the biggest match they can do, so why not? But
yeah, Monty comes out, he's mad, he's not in the match, he wants the winner. Then Truth comes out, Truth says you have to earn your spot, they brawl. Then Dusty comes out and books the match between the two next week, even though, again, he has no authority here.
It is a good bit that the guy with no authority keeps, making executive decisions.
Well, when the other guy who's supposed to have authority keeps making mopey faces, whereas Dusty's just like, you wrestle. It's like, oh yeah, he is the better leader here, isn't he?
Yeah, but I can't just walk into someone's workplace and start making decisions for him.
Yeah, but Vince Russo will be like, bro, I don't know what to do. The two guys, they keep fighting, bro, and I don't know how to settle this. I don't know how to get them to stop. I'm putting my face in my hands, bro. I'm looking all sad.
Now he has Larry Z and Terry Funk to make the decision for him.
Later in that show, Franchise had Russo and asking him about Dusty making all these decisions. He says there will always be a place for Dusty Rhodes in TNA so long as Vince Russo is there. Jarrett interrupts. Russo says, why would he listen to Jarrett? Jarrett points out that he's been trying to do things the right way, but then everything's been going bad for you and you have no friends. Styles interrupts and says, no, I'm Vince Russo's friend. And then Jarrett and AJ brawl into the building. Monty comes out. AJ drop kicks them both. Monty bounces AJ. Killings makes the save. Monty and Jarrett get the better of them before Hardy makes the actual save.
The most upsetting part of this is AJ Styles being in the general vicinity of the main event scene. Because when he's X Division champ, he escapes the Jarrett verse.
Yeah, it's weird because he's still in an X Division feud this month. He's feuding with Kid Cash. But yeah, he's in the orbit. It's just upsetting.
He's in the orbit of planet Jerrett.
You can't escape it. Its gravitational pull is simply too strong.
Ugh. Yeah, gravitational pull, not a gravitational push. For anyone but him? I made it work.
Impact number 11, August 13. Dusty comes out, he interrupts the card rundown. He knows that D'Amore... Oh, because Vince Russo has banned D'Amore from interfering from now on. He's not only banned from interfering, he's banned from ringside. Whereas Dusty's like, I know he'll interfere. Yeah, I'm just going to beat him up if he does.
Yeah, and good old-fashioned fist fight.
He's just... I like that. It's just... He's going to still interfere. Vince Russo's a dumbass idiot for not thinking he will. So I'm just going to show up and fight him when he does.
Well, actually, Vince is in the right? Because if he does interfere, then he has legal obligation and he can fire him. And then, but Dusty ruins that by getting into a fist fight with him and then making them liable. So technically, Vince was one step ahead and Dusty ruined it.
He can countersuit for assault.
Yeah, so once again, Dusty fucking everything up.
Petey Williams versus Chris Sabin for the X title on August 18th. D'Amore tried to interfere on Petey's behalf, but then Dusty ran him off. Sabin hit the cradle shock, but the ref was distracted by the Dusty and D'Amore brawling. Rude ran in, Northern lariated Sabin, Canadian Destroyer. D'Amore tries to cheap shot Dusty, but then accidentally hits PD. 3LK drag D'Amore to the ring. D'Amore and Dusty face off for a second, but D'Amore bails. Then Russo shows up and gives out to Dusty once again.
So, there's not going to be a lot of discussion about what's going on. It's mostly just going to be letting you know what's happening.
It's the exact same angle, rinse and repeat over and over again. Vince Russo says don't get involved, Dusty gets involved, Vince Russo's mad, they shout at each other. That's all that happens this month across every single television show.
And it's like every feud kind of has that formula too, because the tag teams is just the same tag match 7 times.
Yeah, it's just Triple X and AMW, which you would think you wouldn't get tired of that, but only the first match is good. And it's just nothing is happening in this company. It's just the same segments every week.
Not a lot of in-depth discussion going to come from this podcast this month, or not even like fun rambling us yelling about things either. Like it's just going to be finding out what happened.
There is nothing to say about it. There's nothing. Like, Dusty's not even good anymore. He's just rambling. He loses his train of thought halfway through half his promos. He forgot Jeff Jarrett's name at one stage. It's just like, Dusty's not even fun. It's just a bunch of dumb people who don't wrestle who are shouting at each other, and they won't even give me anything good.
Yeah.
I just have to look at sad Vince Russo over and over again. I have to stare at his just run down, disinterested face as he's so upset that he has to make the smallest of decisions, and he's still moping every week, and he's so upset that Dusty just wants to fight Scott D'Amore. Later on this show, Dusty and Russo are arguing. Monty wrestles Ron Killings. Killings hits an axe kick, but Kid Cash runs out to pull the referee out. Styles runs off Cash, but the distraction allows Monty to hit the pounce and win. Then we get more drama between Russo and Dusty. Russo wants Dusty to follow the rules. Famous rule follower, Vinny Rue. And then
He's a new man.
Russo's like, don't make me do something I don't want to do. I told you, for as long as you work here, bro, you got a job here. And he seems to suggest that Dusty is pushing him toward firing the American Dream.
Yeah. Well, don't worry, I'll think of something to say about it. I thought the segment where they were backstage yelling at each other,
right,
was at least done in a different environment.
It's true, it was outside.
And that made it a little more fun. And I liked that they were both telling Hudson to fuck off.
Hey, no, I liked Scott.
Yeah, but they were just like, what? Get out of here, you pervert.
Scott has also started adding like witty one-liners to the end of all his interviews.
Starting.
But usually he's like, whoa, I'm aghast. Back to you, Mike and Don.
I can't believe what I just witnessed.
It was like the segment where Abyss eats all the shrimp. He's like, I hope you wrote some lemon for that shrimp. It's like, hey, well done,
shrimp.
Scott. Good job. Naturals defeat Conan and BG by DQ to retain the tag titles. We'll talk about all this stuff in the tag stuff again. D'Amore tried to... We probably won't, actually, because nothing actually happens. D'Amore tried to interfere, but Dusty...
Get it all out of the way now.
Dusty intercepted again. Dusty hit Andy Douglas with a hockey stick, but Posey saw it and called for the DQ, allowing the Naturals to retain the tag titles. So, Impact, number 12, August 20th, we open with Petey Williams versus Eddie Villa. Actually, we don't open, that was middle of the show. Canadian Destroyer for the win. D'Amore comes out, Dusty confronts him, Team Canada attack D'Amore, Trail K makes the save.
I literally just did like the Naito half fall asleep.
Franchise has Russo. He wants to know what Russo's going to do about Dusty. Russo's like, I need to cool off, bro. I'll do something on Wednesday. Scott D'Amore runs up. He's mad. He wants to know what he's going to do. Russo's like, you're out of line, pal.
Everyone on this show is like, I'll work it out on the next one. Don't worry.
Everyone's kicking it down the line. Jeff Hammond, by the way, who we haven't even mentioned yet, and he's been on the show for 2 months. He's doing these 6 points of impact interviews where he's just talking to a dude. He's like,
I think they're pretty good.
Yeah, they're solid. They're nice little interviews. It's just
like a worse version of Tenay's segments.
He just wants to run down some story beats, the guys do promos, and then he joins commentary for like the main events on Impact, and he is perfectly serviceable.
Yeah, I like the Larry Z one.
Yeah, so he's talking to Larry Z here. He talks about Harley Race. He talks about the struggles of a champion, how Funk is a wild card and Dusty's ego is humongous, and thinks Russo and Rhodes is a ticking time bomb. So D'Amore interrupts the card rundown on this and challenges Trio K and Dusty to get it on right now. Dusty took down D'Amore, but then Russo brought out security and separated everybody.
Boo.
See, again, this speaks to Vince Russo's bad leadership in that, like, these two men want to fight. If you let them fight, then they wouldn't be interrupting the show every week anymore. So
Whoa. Scott D'Amore ain't a wrestler, okay? He's a manager, he's a coach.
hey, he had a 15-minute match with Jerry Lynn. That's a wrestler if I've ever seen one.
Sure did.
Oh, last pay-per-view of the month, August 25. Team Canada came out.
It's been the worst rundown ever.
It's the same segment, Liam. I'm so sorry.
Don't even give details. Just bust it through. Let's go.
Demanded answers from Russo. Russo came out. He looking sadder than ever. This is the saddest he looked this month. Russo comes out. He says D'Amore needs to make an appointment if he wants to talk to Vinny Roo. He can't just call him out. Russo tells D'Amore to get out of his face, and he will never tell Russo to do his job. Dusty and Trio K come out. Team Canada bails. Dusty condemns the Canadians for taking all the Americans' jobs. Calls him out. Then Russo suspends Dusty Rhodes and bans him from the building and has security eject him.
I like Don was like, oh man, I don't know if I can kick out Dusty Rhodes or feel bad. And then Dusty's like, fuck you, do it. And then he's like, alright, well fuck you then, I will.
No from BW Torch. Some wrestlers are chuckling at the ego of Dusty Rhodes. I think that he's developed over the last month or two because the push he's receiving on television. Dusty considers himself the most overrated face in the company, and he hasn't been shy about saying that while in the earshot of other wrestlers. And also, he's probably right. So,
yeah, but like he shouldn't be. Like he is, but he shouldn't.
It's him or Jeff. It's no one else. Maybe AJ. People do like AJ. Scott Hudson had Larry Z later in that show. He's focused on September 8th. The Championship Committee are just focused on the Jarrett and Hardy title match. They want none of this business with Dusty and Russo over on the side.
That was literally the same segment that Larry Z did last time too, which is very funny.
So there was meant to be a 6-man tag team match on the show. It was meant to be BG, Conan, and Dusty against Scott D'Amore, Eric Young, and Johnny Devine. But because Dusty has been suspended, that becomes a handicap match, which 3LK are not entirely happy with because Russo's fucking him over again.
Damn.
Dusty showed up at ringside, laid into D'Amore. BG pinned Devine with a pump handle slam, but the man who stated, Liam, on the record, he will never overturn a referee's decision. Vince Russo came out and overturned a referee's decision.
Yeah, that's fucking storytelling, Garrett. Because they're doing the will he turn to be a bad guy again? He's going back on his word. I'm sorry that you couldn't pick up on the nuances of the wrestling storyline in the NWA TNA.
He already went back at his word when he overturned the Killings decision.
Yeah, but that time it wasn't a part of a storyline. This one is.
Okay.
Duh.
And the one Dusty segment I liked this month was the last Impact of the month where he shows up in the crowd and Vince Russo's like, get out of here, get him out of here. He sends Don Harris to eject him, and then they cut to a shot of him just sitting there having a drink with Don Harris 2 minutes later.
Yeah, it was like a red drink.
Drinking some kind of punch.
I was very confused as to what he was drinking.
I will say, though, Dusty did the whole I have a ticket thing. You didn't need a ticket to get in the Impact Zone.
Well, he had one.
There was no tickets. It was not a ticketed system. You stood in line.
Well, he bought a ticket to go to the front of the line.
Brought his own ticket.
That's even funnier. I have a ticket. You don't need one.
Team Canada defeated what was honestly my favorite job team on Impact so far. Ron Steele, Bruce Steele, Mikey Batts, and Jarrell Clark.
When they were coming out and it said the Steele Brothers, I was like, yes.
Because they all came out together.
This is the time.
It was the highlight of Impact this month to see all those 4 men make their entrance. So D'Amore shouted at Dusty. Dusty said he had a ticket. Dusty got stuck into Team Canada before security separated them. Russo had Dusty ejected before Petey Williams pinned Jarrell Clark with a Canadian Destroyer.
Let's go to the other very exciting storyline of the month, the heavyweight title scene.
Hey, there's one more thing. Russo shouted at him.
No,
Trio
there
came back
isn't.
him up.
You lied.
There you go.
Oh, what a shock. Okay. Thank God we got that in.
The 2 men who shouted at each other all month continued to shout at each other.
This, podcast is actually just a good representation of watching 2 people, go crazy. You're watching the deterioration of 2 people throughout this entire show. We started off with such gusto, and we were an hour and 15 minutes in, and it's pure unhinged chaos already.
Because we had to talk about what's actually happened on this show, these shows, which is nothing. Nothing happened.
You know what it is? You know what energy we're in right now? 4th hour of recording.
Yeah, and we're only an hour and a half into the actual recording. Oh.
But this is how we are during our last hour normally.
Can you imagine how we are when we get to Goldilocks?
Well, that's going to be the highlight. That's just going to bring us back.
The best of the rest stuff is probably the best stuff this month.
Yeah. The Raven stuff was good, and so was the Goldie stuff. That's why we're going to save it to the end, to give us a reason to keep going on. Garrett.
Yes, Liam.
It's the end of an era.
We had the end of Goldilocks in the September episode. Now October, November. Vince Russo notified company officials that he is resigning from his creative role within the company in the next 30 days. Basically, that the November 7th Victory Road pay-per-view would be his final night.
I am crying. I am depressed. I have locked myself in my room. I refuse to leave my bed. I don't know how to go on watching this promotion. I'm devastated. My vote didn't count. The election was rigged. I don't know. I don't know how to live in a world without Vince Russo.
You know, I met Vince Russo once.
Oh, did you?
I was at Bound for Glory 2010, where I was there with my brother, and we were just walking through the halls of the hotel where there were a bunch of wrestlers because we were staying in the same hotel because it was part of the fan experience or whatever you call it, the travel package for Bound for Glory. And
awful.
And my brother said to me, if we ever see Vince Russo, I have to take a picture with him with the biggest smile on my face I can muster. And literally we rounded the corner, and who else did we run into but Vince Russo?
Did you take the photo?
Damn right I took the photo of me and Vinny Roo.
Oh, please upload that photo.
I'll upload the photo after this episode goes up. My brother's actually been pestering me to tell that story for 18 months worth of TNAs. He's ever since Russo showed up. Also, this means this is the episode where the "oh shit, it's Vince Russo" is taken out of the open. This will be the last one that's in there.
Oh my. We'll have to find something just as impactful.
Yeah, so that's also the end of an era. We're also changing the theme song for this episode, not just the clips, but the theme song will go to the Impact theme song now rather than the pay-per-view theme song.
You should put in the clip of me calling Dave a royalist.
Petey Williams is an amazing athlete. Dave's a fucking royalist.
Yeah, it should just be that over and over again.
I don't want to put people through that. We've already suffered enough.
Yeah, with the loss of Vince Russo.
He told friends that he is simply frustrated with how the company is run and how little input he has in the creative process.
Speak on it!
He's simply tired of arguing with Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel over the direction of the company and feels that it's pointless to continue bickering with them since they make him feel like he is insulting them by questioning their booking decisions. Russo says he plans to stick with the company until his angle with Dusty Rhodes plays out, which means through the November 7th pay-per-view and the election for the Director of Authority. There's always a chance that Russo could have a change of heart. He doesn't now, at least, especially if he and Jarrett can get back on the same page. This wouldn't be the first time he's threatened to leave the company, but we know, for once, he does follow through with it.
Once he does commit to his word.
Again, the classic, all these quotes come from Disco. One source said that Russo had done his best to keep his cool, but has been voicing his frustrations to friends for quite a while now. He's a very loyal guy who loves the business, but just can't take the BS anymore, said the source.
No more BS, Vince Russo.
It'd be so funny if it turns out this is actually AJ talking to the Torch and not Disco.
It's David Young.
So there is a growing power vacuum here because obviously Russo's on the way out. Jarrett, his attention is being pulled away from booking and company responsibilities because the cancer returns in his wife and his father Jerry is having heart trouble. So there's a lot of problems going on at home for him. A lot of things that demand his attention more than silly little wrestling companies. Also, Joey Your Legend said awful things about Jeff Jarrett this month. Terrible, terrible man.
Really?
He said something to the extent in a media interview that Jarrett deserved his wife getting her cancer back. And it's like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you?
What a cool guy.
There is no amount of wrestling bullshit. None. He could have fucked your career altogether that would have justified you saying that to another human being. And he didn't even do that much to him.
That's rough.
What a horrible man. But yeah, Jarrett's attention is being pulled away. Russo's on the way out. There's a ton of locker room dissatisfaction with the way things have been booked over the last 6 months or so. We mentioned that in the last episode. It's been mounting. So a change is on the horizon.
This is the point where it's you hit Dusty Rhodes music and he runs to the ring. Oh, power vacuum daddy.
Dixie Carter has told several people over the last few weeks that she realizes the product stinks right now. She has been openly questioning...
Now?
Well, like, there is periods, you know, in the middle of '03, it's not good, but it feels hot-ish. Hot is probably a generous term, but it doesn't feel dead.
Yeah, but now?
But yeah, she's finally reached a stage where it's like, maybe it does stink.
This is like the best it's been in a year.
She has been openly questioning the idea of filling Impact with squash matches, which Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel defend by saying it's the only way to get over new characters. One of the reasons Russo grew so frustrated with his role in the company is that he grew tired of telling some of his favorite wrestlers and friends that the company didn't have any storylines for them. Among those said to be Russo's favorites are Raven, Glenn Gilberti, Johnny Swinger, Pat Kenny, Sonny Siaki, and Eric Watts. The true dream team of TNA right there.
Oh my god, all of the bad people in Raven.
So the next story, the continued feud between the American Dream Dusty Rhodes and Vince Russo finally comes to a head.
This is just a bunch of segments.
Yeah, so they set up pretty early in the month. Vince Russo and Dusty have at odds for months and months and months and months and months and months and months now. Longer than I think anybody could care. So the October 1st episode, they're all in an office. That's where Funk was supposed to be there, but it turns out that it was actually Harley Race as the other member of the championship committee was called in, as opposed to Funk. So there's a bunch of vignettes that night where they're all in the Director of Authority's office. Larry walks out. He's like, this is a waste of time. It's so stupid. Harley Race walks out and he's like, Dusty sucks, but Russo sucks just as much. And then Dusty walks out and he's like, they have a failure to communicate, daddy. And I have my own agenda. And he's going to take care of business.
I like that Larry calls Dusty Rhodes goofy.
He does. He uses the word goofy, which is quite good. I do approve of it. Also, if you look at the background of all of these segments, there's a Chronicles of Riddick poster.
I was curious what the poster was.
Yeah, so there you go. We should review all of the films that feature on posters in TNA.
Nah.
Oh, how could you not love this suggestion? So, October 15th, Impact. Franchise has Dusty again. Dusty says Hardy will up the ante tonight as they build to the ladder match. Russo wants to know what Dusty's talking about, and Dusty's like, don't you worry, daddy. He's like, I run the show, would you stop it? Dusty wants an election between Russo and Dusty to see who will be the Director of Authority.
Great.
So, this is '04. This is moving into, the Bush and John Kerry election, right?
Yep.
So, the playing off of that, as the next week, we did have a bunch of campaign ads. There's a Dusty Rhodes campaign ad and a Vince Russo campaign ad.
Yeah, but I like Vince Russo's kind of one where he's like, he's tearing down Dusty Rhodes, and he's like, there'll be a show full of promos.
It's like interviews on an endless loop, said in like the full political attack ad. It's like, how did you know he would have interviews on an endless loop and his bionic elbow is fucking stupid.
Yeah. And it's like, all right. And then Dusty has like a local man running for like council style ad.
Yeah, he's like, he has the experience, knowledge misspelt, by the way, spelt KNOWLDEDGE here. And this promo aired at least 3 times this month, including on Victory Road itself, and they never fixed the typo in knowledge.
You know what? I take it back, Dave Hardy out of the Hall of Fame.
It's either like masterful political satire or bad quality control. And I'm leaning toward bad quality control, but still.
Yeah, I'm not giving them the credit for that one.
Because it would be a good bit to satirize political ads and misspell the word knowledge. That would be actually a pretty good bit, but I don't think it's a bit.
It sure would be a good bit.
Yeah, and then Russo ran the actual attack ad. He's like, I'm a law-hardened man from the mean streets of New York.
And he carries a big stick.
He does carry a big stick. He does have his baseball bat. The franchise has Dusty on that show. Dusty admits to planning a negative campaign. he's like, I'm not going to have moral high ground here. We're taking each other down. Talks about how he'll make decisive decisions. Jarrett's mad, asks what Dusty's role even is. He's the voice of Liam Jones in this one.
Yeah, exactly. Dusty has no role. He's just a fucking sociopath who's making decisions when he has no actual authority to do so.
Jarrett shouts at Dusty for like a minute, and then Dusty just deadpans, why, Jeffrey, are we crossed with each other?
Good, he's so good.
And that's the outline as well, which is very good. October 29th opens with a Dusty Rhodes campaign stop. He has a campaign event at the start of Impact. He comes out to the Hail to the Chief song alongside D-Ray 3000, who has a Dusty 2004 sign.
I know who D-Ray's voting for.
Okay, he should have legally changed his name to D-Ray 2004, where the D stood for Dusty.
Ah, Dusty Ray.
Dusty hit immediately the God Bless America line. The man is playing the hits. Can't blame him. He does his final campaign speech before he introduces Trio K as the next tag team champions in AMW. We're like, hey, what's up with all this?
Yeah, you're a member of our team, you fuck.
Yeah, what happened to American Dream's Most Wanted?
He's like, I saw you being a part of Stormy Daniels, and I know that's not good for my campaign.
So yeah, he's lining up all his validators. He has Trio K there. He has a bunch of people ringside. He introduces AJ as the next X champ. Then Hardy as the next World champ.
Well, he was wrong about 2 of the 3 of these.
So clearly he shouldn't have won the campaign.
Spoilers, Garrett, come on.
Russo interrupts, says it may be the last time he speaks in front of a wrestling audience. Crowd cheers. Dusty then got feisty. Russo said he's used to people trying to run him out of the wrestling business because he's the only one who sticks up for the younger talent.
Yeah, this is insane to me, right? Like, listen, I don't know if it's true or not. I don't watch no WCW, but it does feel a lot like Russo's like, I'm leaving. I'm going to make myself look like the good guy as much as possible.
If you look across Russo's history of booking shows largely by himself, you could probably make an argument that he does lean toward younger guys than older guys. Or like, he makes a like, it's not a concerted effort. It's more of like a token effort toward putting young guys in positions that look on the surface like pushes, but really aren't. Like the Billy Kidman one in WCW is the prime example, where like he was meant to be feuding with Hulk Hogan and to the point of elevating him, and it did everything but elevate Billy Kidman. And there's a lot of that throughout his booking history, where like he would put a guy like Eric Young in a new position, but the push would never last, it would peter out, and it would always just end up being like Scott Steiner instead. So it's to be fair, it's more complicated than just saying no, he never does that. But also, it's very much him seeing himself as the guy who gives young people opportunities when the opportunities he does give them might not necessarily be particularly good.
Yeah.
Like AJ in TNA is like a perfect example, where it's like, well, yeah, AJ did become world champion, but as a dumbass idiot heel turn where he played second fiddle to you the entire time.
So, like, on a base level, sure. But if there's any sort of meaningful analysis here, it's like, not really.
Yeah, he then accuses Dusty of stealing the young guy's spotlight.
Which he literally does! Like, but also Vince does that!
Yeah.
Literally! He ruined AJ's entire fucking title run!
How dare you bring up the past? He's a better man now, Liam. He's learned from those mistakes.
Although, I will accept that whole run just for those clips of AJ doing flips into the pool to impress his dad.
And Joey Legend's New York accent, despite his problematic thoughts this month. He says, regardless of the result, he knows he did the right thing, and then they do a little pull apart.
Just a little one.
It's an itty bitty pull apart. Later in that show, Roddy Piper comes out. We'll talk about the other Piper stuff later, but this ties directly into the Russo Dusty stuff, because he comes out to do like a vox pop of the crowd about whether they choose Dusty or they choose Russo. But that's not before he does a promo where he calls Scott Hall fat.
He was like... They started playing him off, he was going on for so long.
And he still did like another minute afterwards.
He's like, fuck you, I'm gonna keep going.
Like, he ends this promo being like, baby, they should not take the chains off me. It's like, you're right.
And they're like, maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah, so he's walking around ringside being like, are you voting for Dusty or are you voting for Russo? Like, one guy says Dusty, one guy says Russo. Then he turns to a third guy and he's like, what about you? And he's like, Dustin.
And which, you know what? Fair. It should be Dustin Rhodes.
I don't think he's making a joke or anything. I think he just has no idea what's happening. And Piper's like, you mean Dusty, pal? Nah, he's a good kid. He's a good kid.
Do you think him saying Dustin popped Piper?
I'm just imagining this one dude who just went to Universal this day. You know, he wants to get the Minion or the Thing 1 and Thing 2 t-shirt. He wants to see the globe.
Minion.
Minions weren't invented yet. The Minions are all over the place in the future, but in 05 Universal, it's pure. It's only Thing t-shirts there. No Minion t-shirts.
John Carpenter's The Thing?
No, Dr. Seuss's The Thing.
No. They should do a collaboration.
So he just wants to ride the Mummy coaster, he wants to ride the Hulk, and he sees this live wrestling shows here, so he's dragged in.
He wants to see the Chronicles of Riddick.
Yeah, he sees that sign and he's accidentally finds himself front row in the Impact Zone, and suddenly Roddy Piper is asking him questions.
I like to imagine he's just a big Dustin fan.
Yeah. Oh, but for this segment, like, now Tenay and West are just talking, they're doing the usual on camera, and bagpipes start playing, and Mike Tenay is like, what? And then Don West starts shouting, bagpipes! Bagpipes!
Don West just had flashbacks
to all the Asylum promos. He does, yeah, he hates bagpipes. So that does bring us to the show itself, Victory Road, November 7th. The deciding vote, sponsored by Backyard Wrestling 2.
Yeah, which is awesome, by the way. My favorite thing about this entire segment is the fact that there's like a 30% of the crowd that is chanting for Russo.
Well, to be fair, Scott Hudson informs us that the vote at the start of the show is 54.8% Dusty, 45.2% Russo. So that, you know what? That's about the right percentage of people chanting for Vince Russo.
It's fair enough.
They did a bunch of like fun little political satire about how Russo carried New York, Dusty carried Texas, but Georgia's up for grabs, and how there's been a web server breakdown in Stamford, Connecticut.
Which is a great bit.
Like, they're more aggressively positioning themselves as like the WWE alternative. Like, there's those 30-second ads. I think there's 3 of them this month.
And they're old-timer ads.
The we have 6 appeal ads, they're the big guys, the size doesn't matter ad, and then there's a third one as well. Like, I like them. I think they're really charming.
Yeah, why not?
It's like, yeah, like even just the wordplay. It's like, we have 6 appeal, whereas they're just regular old squares. It's like, that's clever. Well done.
That's a good bit.
That's much better than I smacked it raw, I want more TNA.
I take it back.
So yeah, Scott Hudson updates us throughout the night on the status of the poll before Mike Tenay comes to the ring and announces that Dusty Rhodes received 55.6%. Vince Russo received 44.4%.
He looked so sad. One final sad face for the road.
He really does sink it in. His saddest of sad faces. And this is his last night with the company. He's done after this. He is actually gone.
Good. I mean, actually, I don't know. Maybe.
Dusty's your new DOA. He does a speech. He announces Triple X against AMW and 6 Sides of Steel at Turning Point. We'll get into their full feud in a minute. Puts over the upcoming Best Damn Sports show special. Says Hardy will win tonight. And it's like, the boys up north, they're glued to their TVs thinking we have a fight in our hands now. And then Dusty kind of loses track of his promo and keeps talking for a minute, and then it just ends.
What a blow off to the Vince Russo legacy.
Yeah, this is, I believe, the end of Vince Russo as an on-air character. I have in the back of my head, I think he does like one vignette other than this. Well, like a real quick one. But like, he's not director authority, he's not a manager, he's not an on-screen character in a meaningful, consistent capacity at all for the rest of TNA history. So Liam, this is the end of Vince Russo retrospective.
Well. There's been some highs. There's been some lows.
Name the highs.
That previous aforementioned segment where he was AJ Styles' dad.
Mm-hmm.
When he was a complete psycho, I think he was enjoyable on television.
Even like the early days of S.E.X, he did some good promos.
Yeah, he was like an insane person, and that was great. As soon as he got like all boring and religious-y, there was like no purpose to him in any capacity.
He found Jesus and got boring.
Happens to the best of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not exactly... I don't care. I'm glad he's gone, but like... There was a certain level of something to seeing Vince Russo on your screen at the start.
And like all the way back to the oh shit it's Vince Russo, like his very first appearance. I don't want to say he felt special because he didn't.
He felt something.
There was something. You felt something. I think that is actually the best way to put it. That like no matter what, when he was on screen, you did feel something. Whether it was anger, occasional entertainment, or just disbelief at whatever he was doing. Like, Vince Russo did make you feel something through his entire TNA run. And the creative was better off when he was slightly more involved.
Which is, like, crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's like when you look at the first 2.5 years leading up to this show, you're like, well, the 6 months there where it's like they found the balance of like Jarrett, Disco, D'Amore, and Russo, and they were all chipping in ideas. It's like they had a pretty good like 3-4 months there before Dutch came in and ruined it.
Yeah, which honestly goes back to Hulk Hogan. So really, Hulk Hogan's the problem.
Yeah, and like the big talks about Hogan coming in is because they knew like Russo was donezo here, that he had served his notice and he was actually gone. He was done with TNA. He was moving on. It wasn't a power play. It wasn't any of that. He's just fair enough. He comes back. Wish he didn't, but
No, he doesn't. Shut up.
yeah, this is the end of him as a character on TV, which is a complicated legacy in many ways. Ruined AJ's first title run, overshadowed it completely. The first title win was all about AJ. That was the first time you got like properly mad on this show.
A legacy.
Again, you felt something. You can't deny it.
Yeah, it was pure rage, but I felt something.
And that is what Vince Russo will always get out of us. We will always feel something.